Hi guys. Tonight we're walking into a world of white silence, the kind that swallows sound and makes your breath curl like smoke from a dying candle. You can almost hear your heartbeat under the weight of the Ice Age sky. Somewhere in the distance, wind screams through the valley, shredding flakes of snow into glassy shards. You pull your fur cloak tighter. The air is knife cold, and if you stood here too long, well, you probably wouldn't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. You stand beneath a vault of stars, their frozen light spilling across a landscape shaped by glaciers and desperation. The year could be 40,000 BCE, or any time when winter ruled longer than memory. Every inhale scrapes your throat with frost. The ground beneath your boots crunches like bone dust. You've entered the age when survival wasn't a story, it was the only story. Your eyes scan the valley floor. No smoke trails, no flicker of human life. Just endless tundra stitched with mammoth tracks. Yet somewhere out there, tucked beneath drifts or wedged into cliffs, people like you are still alive. They've learned to twist nature's cruelty into architecture, to turn blizzards into building material. And you're about to learn their secret. A historian once called these early humans engineers of necessity. It's a neat phrase, but standing here you sense it's far more primal. You feel how shelter isn't comfort, it's heartbeat protection. One mainstream fact: average winter temperatures in parts of Ice Age Europe could plunge below 20 degrees Celsius, and winds reached hurricane force. To stay alive even one night demanded genius, luck, and teamwork. You imagine the smell of wet fur and wood smoke drifting from some hidden camp. You can't see it yet, but your pulse insists it's close. Your footprints vanish behind you as the wind reshapes them instantly, a reminder that history itself can be erased just as easily. That's why archaeologists still argue whether some of the first winter shelters were permanent homes or seasonal sanctuaries carved by nomads chasing reindeer herds. Under your glove, the cold gnaws until you can barely feel your fingers. You picture early hands doing the same, only bare and calloused. Those hands cut into permafrost, stacked stone, lashed bone. They learned that warmth could be trapped like prey if you built walls low and roofs round. In a quirky twist, scientists found traces of powdered red ochre mixed into ancient floor layers, maybe insulation, maybe ritual, maybe just decoration, because even in misery people liked color. Snowflakes sting your eyelashes. You blink and think of how prehistoric eyes adapted. Wider pupils, better low-light vision perhaps, though no one can prove it. You reach the foot of a ridge and see a narrow cleft that breaks the wind. Instinct tells you it's a good place. You crouch, tasting the air for shelter, the way wolves sniff for dens. The rhythm of survival becomes almost musical. Listen for silence. Feel for warmth. Follow your breath. You press your palm to the rock. It's smoother than expected, maybe from countless generations leaning here. You realize this wall has outlasted language. Somewhere behind it, there could be the char of an old hearth, a scatter of flint flakes, the ghost of a sleeping family. The wind moans again, and you almost hear laughter beneath it. It's a strange comfort proof that humanity's oldest song is simply endurance. You crouch lower, tracing frost patterns that look like maps. If you could translate them, they'd tell you where the herds moved, where the rivers froze last, where someone once built a circle of stones to block the wind. Historians still debate whether those early migrations were planned or desperate accidents. Maybe both. Maybe the Ice Age didn't care what motivated you, it just demanded that you adapt or disappear. A scent catches your nose, charcoal and animal fat. You turn toward it, following like a moth to heat. The snow thickens. Each step sinks deeper until your calves burn. When you finally glimpse a faint orange glow flickering between stones, relief washes through you so hard it's almost dizzying. There it is, the heartbeat of your species. Fire inside shelter, civilization's first whisper. Someone beckons you closer, a shape bundled in fur, eyes reflecting flame. You duck beneath a roof of hides stretched over mammoth ribs. The air inside tastes of smoke and breath and melting snow. A low hum of voices, tired but steady. Children curl beside sleeping dogs. Bones creak in the heat. Snow melts from your hair, and the wind outside becomes a distant ghost. You settle beside the hearth. Sparks drift upward, clinging to the roof like stars refusing to die. Around you, life rearranges itself. Tools drying, meat smoking, whispers softening. This tiny pocket of warmth is everything the fragile difference between extinction and mourning. You understand now that building shelter wasn't about dominance over nature. It was an act of partnership, even reverence. The blizzard roars outside, but you're inside history's first architecture of hope. Close your eyes. The fire's rhythm slows your heartbeat until it matches the wind's lull. Somewhere out there, more families are searching for their own hollow, their own miracle of warmth. And you, frozen traveler, accidental time tourist, will walk with them through each step of invention. Tomorrow, you'll leave this shelter to hunt the perfect hollow for yourself. But tonight, you just listen. Outside, snow keeps falling, patient as time itself. You wake before the sun, if the pale shimmer above the horizon can be called that. The air inside the shelter has gone still, heavy with the musk of smoke and drying fur. Someone nearby shifts under a pile of hides, and the soft rasp of breathing reminds you how fragile warmth can be. Outside, the blizzard has softened to a whisper, but the cold still waits like a predator beyond the entrance flap. You stretch, feeling stiffness creep from shoulders to knees, and realize it is time to search for a new place to build. Survival means movement. You crawl out into the early light. The snowfield glows faintly blue, every shadow hard-edged, every sound crisp. Your boots sink deep, but each step carries purpose. You scan the horizon, your eyes tracing the rise of ridges, the folds of the land. Prehistoric people did this every morning of their lives, learning the grammar of hills and hollows by instinct. You are beginning to understand their language. To find the perfect hollow, you first learn to read the wind. It has habits, like an animal. It curls through valleys, leaps ridges, then slides down slopes in cold waves. Early humans would crouch and toss handfuls of snow into the air, watching which way it drifted. You do the same, and the flakes veer sharply east. That tells you the storm's path and where the land might offer shelter. Even a small curve in the earth can be the difference between life and frostbite. Mainstream archaeology tells us that Upper Paleolithic people often camped near the base of cliffs or river terraces where wind was gentler and the ground easier to dig. Some traces of hearths and debris show that these spots were used again and again, almost like ancestral addresses written in stone. You can imagine the comfort of returning to the same safe hollow each year, knowing the rock still remembers you. You press forward, snow crunching with a sound like paper tearing. The wind scours your cheeks raw. Your breath forms clouds that linger before your face as if reluctant to leave. You notice the subtle patterns in the terrain, the drifted snow that piles differently on leeward sides, the frost crust that cracks only on southern slopes. To prehistoric eyes, this was data. To you, it feels like reading the oldest weather report on Earth. Suddenly, a fox darts across your path, orange fur flashing against white. You follow its trail for a while, partly out of curiosity, partly out of hope. Animals always know where to hide. The fox leads you toward a tumble of boulders half buried in snow. Between them, a small gap opens into a sheltered alcove. You step closer and feel the air grow still. It is perfect. Historians still argue whether early people deliberately sought these natural shelters first or learned by accident after years of freezing failures. Some say instinct guided them, others claim trial and error. Either way, once found, these hollows became the blueprint for future architecture. Rock faces on three sides, an opening to the south for light, and snow piled at the base for insulation. You can almost see the plan forming in your mind. You kneel, brushing snow from the ground. The soil beneath is hard, but not frozen through. You strike it with a piece of antler and hear the dull, satisfying thud of earth that will hold a hearthstone. You smile at the thought. Even in the Ice Age, small victories mattered. A patch of ground that will not collapse under fire was a reason to celebrate. The quirky part of the story is that some early groups scattered crushed shells or ash across the floor of their shelters, perhaps to keep moisture down or discourage insects. Archaeologists once puzzled over these layers until someone realized they also reflected firelight, making interiors brighter. Imagine that, the first prehistoric mood lighting designed entirely by accident. You stand, rubbing your arms. The cold presses closer now, eager to remind you that thinking too long is dangerous. You walk around the boulders, noting how they deflect the wind. One side forms a natural wall almost 2 meters high. You can already imagine stretching hides between the rocks, sealing gaps with snow and frozen mud. The entrance faces south, catching sunlight even on short winter days. This, you decide, is where you would build. The world seems momentarily kind, but you know that can change. You glance back toward the horizon, where distant smoke still rises from the camp you left. It feels strange to think of them as ancient and you as modern, when the need that drives you is exactly the same. Food, warmth, belonging. Technology changes, but the chill of loneliness feels timeless. A gust of wind lifts a swirl of powder into your face. You blink, half laughing, half cursing. The storm is never truly gone. It just rests between breaths. You duck into the hollow and crouch low, shielding your face with your arm. The wind sighs overhead, but you barely feel it here. The sound softens into a hum that almost feels like approval. You scrape more snow aside and test the corners of your chosen refuge. Already you are thinking like a builder, not a wanderer. Soon mammoth bones or driftwood will frame your walls, but that is for later. For now, it is enough to understand what the land is teaching. Survival begins with listening. You tilt your head back and watch the clouds crawl across the sky, their undersides tinted pink by the rising Sunday. For a moment, the cold feels less cruel. Somewhere behind those clouds, another group might be doing exactly what you are searching, testing, hoping. The Ice Age was vast, but its people were never truly alone. You take one last look around the hollow, committing every detail to memory. The rock's curve, the snow's thickness, the smell of lichen. When you close your eyes, you can almost hear the heartbeat of the earth itself, slow and deep, like a drum buried beneath the frost. And in that rhythm, you find something steady enough to build on. Tomorrow you will gather bones and hides. Tonight you have found your foundation. The wind sharpens again by afternoon, slicing across the tundra like invisible blades. You pull your hood tighter and follow the ridge toward a scatter of pale shapes half buried in snow. At first, they look like boulders. Then, as you draw closer, the pattern emerges, curved arcs of ivory, rib bones rising like the ribs of a sleeping giant. This is no accident of nature. This is architecture born of extinction and genius. You stop, awestruck. Someone built this. Long ago, people gathered the remains of mammoths not only for meat or tools, but as raw material for homes. Archaeological evidence suggests that such bone dwellings appeared across parts of Eastern Europe more than 20,000 years ago. Imagine it. Colossal creatures once thundered across this land, and when they fell, their bones became cathedrals of survival. You step closer. Each rib is planted deep into the earth, curving overhead into a dome. Gaps are filled with snow and packed with mud that has frozen into cement. Around the edges, slabs of tusk anchor the structure like pillars. The smell of age lingers even through the frost, a faint sweetness of ivory and ash. When you touch the bone, it's cold but not lifeless. It hums faintly under your fingers, as if remembering the warmth it once carried inside living flesh. Oddly enough, Excavations have revealed small charms made of mammoth ivory buried near these huts. Some scholars think they were lucky tokens placed during construction, maybe to honor the creature whose body gave them shelter. Others believe they were early forms of decoration, proof that even amid freezing nights, beauty still mattered. You can almost picture a woman pressing a carved bead into the wall before the storm returned, whispering gratitude or apology. Inside one of the ancient domes, the air feels surprisingly calm. The circular design traps heat near the center, and the low roof reduces air movement. Experts generally agree that such dwellings could stay 10 to 20 degrees warmer than the outside air, especially when lined with hides. You crouch, imagining a family clustered around a shallow fire pit, smoke spiraling through a small opening at the top. The flicker of flame would dance across the bones, making them glow amber, as if the mammoth spirit had come home. You notice how the builders use geometry without even naming it. The arcs of the ribs distribute weight evenly, and the dome sheds snow instead of collapsing under it. Today, engineers use the same principle in igloos and domed roofs, yet here it was discovered by people who had no mathematics beyond instinct. That realization makes you smile. Sometimes survival teaches faster than theory ever could. Some experts remain divided on whether these structures were permanent homes or seasonal refuges for hunters tracking herds across the tundra. The debate still lingers because each site tells a slightly different story. Some show signs of repeated use, others seem abandoned after a single brutal winter. You picture families deciding when to move on, weighing warmth against hunger, comfort against chance. You crawl toward the hearth pit. A faint trace of soot still stains the ground, black powder against pale snow. It's the fingerprint of fire older than civilization. Researchers have confirmed that the people who built these homes understood ventilation well enough to let smoke escape without losing precious heat. A small tunnel carved into the side channels air inward, feeding the flames. You can almost hear the soft crackle of wood, the hiss of melting snow dripping from bone. There is something profoundly human about it, taking the body of a creature that once terrified you and turning it into your guardian. It blurs the line between fear and reverence. In a curious twist, some archaeologists noticed that these bone dwellings were often placed in circular arrangements, suggesting a sense of community planning. Each dome faced inward, toward a shared space where stories, songs, or rituals might have unfolded. The circle of bones became a circle of belonging. You picture the scene at dusk, the low hum of voices, the smell of roasted fat, the glow of embers reflecting on ivory walls. Children tracing fingers along grooves in the bone, learning by touch the architecture of their ancestors. The wind outside would wail, but inside it would be muffled to a soft hum, a lullaby shaped by the mammoth's curve. As you rest there, time folds in on itself. The bones around you are relics, yet they feel alive in their stillness. You realize that every rib is a line in humanity's first blueprint, each tusk an early column in the long story of shelter. The mammoth was gone, but in its death, it gave birth to endurance. You step back outside, blinking into the snow glare. The structure behind you gleams pale gold in the fading Sunday. For a fleeting moment, it looks almost modern, the dome's symmetry perfect against the chaos of nature. You think about how later generations would rediscover the same idea in yurts, igloos, and even modern geodesic domes. History isn't a straight path, it's a spiral that circles back to wisdom already known. As twilight deepens, you walk away, leaving the bone dome standing silent against the tundra. The wind picks up again, tracing music through the hollow tusks. It sounds almost like breath, and perhaps in some way it is, the breath of survival that still echoes across millennia, whispering that even in the most brutal cold, humans could make beauty from death. Night falls early on the tundra. The sky dims to a bruised blue, then to black velvet scattered with shards of starlight. The temperature plummets so fast you can almost hear the air tighten. You return to the shelter you scouted earlier, carrying a few charred branches rescued from an abandoned fire pit. Fire will mean survival tonight, but it is not as simple as striking sparks. Inside a bone or snow hut, flame can be both friend and traitor. You crouch near the center of the dome and clear a shallow pit. Frost bites at your knuckles as you arrange stones in a tight ring. Sparks jump when you strike flint against iron pyrite. The smell of sulfur fills your nose, sharp and familiar. A thread of smoke curls upward, thin and tentative, then thickens as the tinder catches. You lean close and whisper to it, as if coaxing a shy animal. Within moments, a fragile flame licks the air. What we know for certain is that prehistoric people mastered the balance of heat and air far earlier than once assumed. Charred layers found in ancient huts show deliberate ventilation patterns, proving they understood airflow. Some groups dug small trenches to draw in fresh air from below, creating a draft that pulled smoke upward through a narrow vent at the top. You watch your own fire breathe, a living creature inside a cave of bone. Intriguingly, traces of resin and animal fat have been found on the inner walls of some dwellings, suggesting people used them as sealants to prevent drafts. That same coating may have also reduced fire risk by making surfaces less porous. Imagine smearing melted marrow and sap across the structure, a grim but clever form of insulation. Even necessity could have an odd sort of artistry. A few researchers remain divided about how fires were managed overnight. Some think families let embers smolder gently to avoid suffocation. Others argue they kept a small hole open, trusting the wind to pull the smoke away. The truth might lie somewhere in between, shifting with the mood of the storm. You test your vent hole now by poking a bone tool upward. A wisp of smoke slides through. The air clears. It works. You sit back, rubbing your hands over the glow. The warmth seeps through your skin like honey. The orange light paints the bones above you in soft gold, turning the whole hut into a lantern. For the first time tonight, the cold feels manageable. You think of families centuries ago doing exactly this. Faces lit by fire, shadows swaying behind them like gentle ghosts. Archaeological findings suggest that control of indoor fire transformed human sleep. Instead of curling up for only a few hours before dawn, people could now rest longer, taking turns to watch the flame. That changed not just their comfort, but their brains. Deeper sleep strengthened memory and imagination. You can almost feel that ancient luxury creeping in, the simple miracle of resting through the night without freezing solid. A curious piece of evidence hints that people burned certain herbs or moss along with wood. Perhaps it masked the smell of meat, or maybe it simply made the air more pleasant. You inhale and imagine the faint sweetness of sage-like smoke filling the air, mingling with the scent of drying hides. Even now, a trace of that mixture lingers in ancient hearth sites. Scientists have analyzed it in microscopic ash layers, finding pollen trapped there for tens of millennia. You stretch your legs toward the fire. The flames cast rhythmic flickers on the dome, almost hypnotic. Each flicker is a heartbeat of time, each crackle a word from the past. You realize that warmth was never just about temperature. It was about connection, the shared glow that kept people close enough to trust. Fire was the first social circle, its light erasing the distance between strangers. Many theories compete to explain how our ancestors learned to keep smoke from choking them. Some say instinct taught them. Others argue that countless mistakes burned the lesson into memory. Whatever the path, the result is genius hidden beneath simplicity. The dome above you exhales gently with each gust outside, keeping the flame alive yet contained. You reach for a strip of dried meat from your pouch, chewing slowly while staring at the embers. It tastes of salt, ash, and survival. You wonder how many meals were eaten just like this, accompanied by silence and the sigh of wind. In that silence, you hear stories forming the first myths born from flickering shadows on walls. Firelight gave imagination a stage. When your eyelids grow heavy, you rake the coals into a small mound and scatter snow along the edges to reflect the heat. The air becomes softer, less biting. Smoke gathers near the roof in a grey halo. You lie back, wrapped in fur, staring up at the ribs of the mammoth glowing faintly red. Outside, the storm howls its endless song, but inside, the rhythm is slower, almost tender. Somewhere between waking and sleep, you imagine the first child who must have opened sleepy eyes to that same view. Firelight painting the ceiling, the scent of resin, the murmur of family breathing nearby. That child grew up to rebuild what the storm destroyed, to teach others how to trap heat without fear. Every new flame carried a fragment of that lesson forward. You drift closer to sleep, one hand resting near the embers. The fire sighs, and a single spark lifts through the vent hole like a shooting star. Outside, the snow swallows it whole. Inside, warmth lingers, stubborn and human. Morning arrives reluctantly, hidden behind a thick veil of snow clouds. The world outside is blindingly white, but inside your shelter, the light filters through in gentle ripples. You stretch, feeling the soft weight of furs over your shoulders, and catch the faint scent of smoke from last night's fire. The air is dry and faintly oily, as if the walls themselves are exhaling warmth. Today, you will rebuild the outer layer of your home. The bones give it shape, but hides are what make it breathe. Every sound outside is muffled by snowfall, giving the morning a strange quietness, the kind that makes your heartbeat sound too loud. You tie your cloak tighter and crawl out into the cold. Across the snowfield, you see hides laid out to stiffen in the frost. Thick pelts of reindeer, musk ox, and mammoth calf shimmer like silver velvet. Each one tells a story of the hunt and of gratitude. Early people treated hides as both material and memory. It is widely accepted among researchers that the process of preparing them was one of the most skilled crafts of the Paleolithic age. Hides meant warmth, shelter, clothing, trade, even status. You pick up a strip of reindeer hide. The fur is dense, soft as moss, yet the skin underneath is tough enough to stop wind. You remember watching others scrape and smoke them to make them pliable. Smoke curing leaves a faint smell that clings forever, something between sweetness and ash. It was both preservation and perfume. In a curious twist, traces of animal fat have been found mixed with soot and pigment on the inner sides of hides used for shelter walls. Some archaeologists believe people rubbed the mixture across the seams to waterproof them. Others suggest it had spiritual meaning, a kind of blessing made from the life of the creature itself. You test the idea now, rubbing a bit of tallow between your fingers, feeling it melt against your skin. The warmth spreads instantly. You begin to fasten the hides around the bone frame. The work is rhythmic: pull, tie, stretch, smooth. Each movement has a sound of its own: the squeak of rawhide cords, the crunch of snow under your knees, the deep sigh of wind outside. Your breath rises in thin plumes. The shelter grows smaller, darker, safer. When the last panel is tied down, you step back and admire the curve of it, soft and low like a sleeping animal. Excavations have shown that some groups decorated their hide walls with dots of red ochre or handprints made from ash. The reason remains uncertain, but the effect would have been mesmerizing when lit by firelight. You imagine sitting inside while snowstorms raged, watching ghostly handprints shimmer across the walls, reminders that others had survived before you. Some experts remain divided about how insulation was handled at ground level. A few believe people piled moss and grass under their sleeping areas, while others think hides were layered directly on snow to trap air pockets. The debate continues, but everyone agrees on one thing: these shelters worked. Carbonized bone fragments and footprints frozen into ancient floors prove families lived for months in temperatures that should have killed them within hours. You crouch by the entrance, sealing the edges with snow. The texture feels strange against the hide, soft but unyielding like frozen flour. You press it down until no light seeps through. Now, the wind slides harmlessly across the dome, its claws dulled by your careful hands. Inside, the air is dim and warm. The smell of fat, fur, and smoke forms a strange comfort, one that seeps into your hair and clothes until it becomes part of you. Oddly enough, in some rare sites, Archaeologists have found fragments of woven grasses stitched between layers of hide. They might have served as primitive filters or insect barriers. You imagine the quiet patience required to weave in that cold, fingers aching but determined. Every thread was a line between life and death. You sit for a while, resting, listening to the faint hiss of wind slipping past the hide walls. The storm outside sounds almost disappointed. You smile, realizing that the cold has become part of the background music rather than an enemy. It is a strange thing how quickly danger turns to rhythm once you understand it. A new thought surfaces as you watch the smoke curl toward the vent hole. These hides once moved, breathed, felt fear. Now they protect you. It is not conquest, but communion. The same relationship continues today, in quieter ways: down-filled jackets, leather boots, wool blankets. Each invention echoes this ancient pact between life and warmth. No one fully agrees on whether these shelters were rebuilt every season or maintained for years. Some were clearly temporary, others seem almost permanent. You imagine returning to the same hollow after a long migration, finding your old hide covering still intact beneath layers of snow, waiting to be revived. The cycle of leaving and returning must have felt as natural as breathing. You crawl outside once more and stand in the stillness. The landscape stretches unbroken, pale as bone. Behind you, the shelter glows faintly amber from the fire within. From a distance, it looks alive, a gentle beast huddled against the cold. You reach out and rest your hand on its side. The hide is warm beneath your palm. For the first time since the storm began, you feel safe enough to laugh quietly into the wind. The air bites at your cheeks, but inside your chest, warmth lingers. The shelter holds, the fire hums, and life for now has triumphed over winter. By the next evening, the storm has shifted from fury to quiet snowfall. You step outside into air so still that each flake seems suspended, shimmering in the pale glow of twilight. The world has turned to silence, a soft, white dream. Every step you take sinks deep, yet the snow does not feel cruel tonight. It feels like possibility. That is when you realize how strange it is that snow, the same element that kills, could also save. As you walk, your boots creak against the surface crust. The wind has calmed enough to let you think clearly. Around you lies a vast ocean of frozen powder, and you begin to see what your ancestors must have seen. Not an obstacle, but a building material. It is widely recognized among glaciologists and archaeologists that snow shelters existed long before the Inuit refined the art of the igloo. Across Ice Age, Europe and Siberia, hunters carved hollows directly into drifts, transforming danger into refuge. You pause beside a ridge where snow has piled high. The layers are dense, pressed by wind and time. You scrape with a flat bone, testing its firmness. The sound is crisp, like cutting chalk. You carve deeper, shaping a small entrance that slopes downward. The air inside feels immediately different, quieter, almost warmer. You slide in, letting the snow close around you. Inside, the light turns blue. The silence is absolute, so thick you can hear your own heartbeat. You sit in that hush, realizing what a perfect insulator snow can be. It traps air in countless tiny pockets, keeping heat from escaping. Researchers have confirmed that temperatures inside a compact snow shelter can hover around 0 degrees, even when the outside air drops far below -20. That difference is enough to keep a body alive through the worst nights. Oddly enough, some ancient tool marks found in permafrost layers suggest that early people carved their snow caves with antler picks or even mammoth scapulae. It must have been exhausting work, done quickly before fingers went numb. You imagine the rhythm of it. Cut, scoop, breathe, repeat. The sound of the blade scraping ice becomes almost meditative. Each stroke brings safety closer. No one fully agrees on how these shelters were first discovered. Some researchers imagine desperate hunters digging into drifts just to escape a sudden squall, then realizing the stillness inside was protective. Others believe children might have noticed it first while playing, burrowing for fun and finding warmth. Whatever the truth, the lesson spread fast, carried by necessity and storytelling. You smooth the walls with your hands. They feel solid yet strangely alive, cold breathing from every surface. A faint sparkle dances in the dim light. You dig a small shelf into one wall to hold your lamp, a hollowed stone filled with animal fat and a flickering wick of moss. The flame sputters, then steadies, casting gold ripples across the curved chamber. According to experimental archaeologists, even the shape of a snow shelter matters. A rounded ceiling lets condensation drip down the walls instead of onto sleepers, and a slightly raised platform keeps you above the coldest air. You follow those ancient blueprints without even thinking, shaping your refuge into something smooth, compact, and kind. The work feels strangely intimate, as if the earth itself were embracing you. A whimsical piece of evidence found in one Ice Age site revealed clusters of red berries frozen into the snow walls. Perhaps they were offerings, or maybe decoration to bring color into the endless white. You press your own small pebble into the wall, just to leave a mark, something to remind future wanderers that a person once rested here. Outside, the sky has darkened completely. The opening to your shelter is only a small circle of faint starlight. You block it with a slab of packed snow, leaving a narrow vent for air. The moment you do, the world vanishes into blue twilight. You can hear nothing, not even the wind. The silence becomes so deep that you begin to feel weightless. It is strange. Sitting inside snow, the cold presses evenly from all sides, yet your body begins to warm its tiny pocket of air. The walls glisten with moisture that freezes again in delicate frost patterns. Your breath curls upward, forming a faint cloud that seems to hover before dissolving into the dome. For the first time in days, you are completely calm. There is a curious comfort in the knowledge that snow, often your enemy, has become your shelter. Archaeologists have found footprints leading to collapsed snow mounds that once housed entire families. These people trusted their shelters so deeply, they slept through nights of howling wind, unaware that nature was both prison and protector. You lie back, wrapping your cloak around your shoulders, the lamp flickering beside you. The scent of smoke and melting fat fills the air. The sound of your breathing becomes the only rhythm. In this soft cocoon of ice, time loses its meaning. You think of the thousands who did the same before you, and the millions who never knew they owed their lives to the kindness of frozen water. As sleep begins to pull at your eyelids, you reach out and touch the wall beside you. It is cold but firm, patient as the moon. For now, it is enough. The storm can rage, the temperature can drop, the world can forget you. Inside this fragile womb of snow, life endures. When dawn finally touches the horizon, the world gleams silver, and your eyelashes are crusted with frost. You crawl from the snow shelter into the pale light and blink against the brilliance. The air tastes clean, sharp enough to wake every cell in your body. The storm has moved on, leaving behind a landscape smoothed into graceful curves. Everything you owned, everything you needed, now fits into a single satchel slung across your shoulder. As you trudge toward the river valley, you start to notice how empty the land feels. There are no trees except for the occasional tangle of willow branches twisted low against the ground. Wood is precious here. In the coldest ages, forests had retreated far to the south. Finding even a few pieces of driftwood felt like uncovering treasure. Archaeological evidence suggests that people gathered every splinter they could find, scavenging from riverbanks or carcasses of fallen trees trapped in ice. You kneel beside a half-buried branch, blackened and dry, probably carried here by floodwater months ago. It creaks when you lift it, brittle but still solid. You scrape away the frost, revealing bark as rough as old leather. This, you think, would serve as the spine of a frame or the handle of a tool. Every stick mattered. Every root could mean warmth. Oddly enough, some ancient campsites show evidence of people burning animal bones in place of firewood. The marrow fat burned hot, producing light and heat long after the flames of wood had faded. The air must have smelled faintly sweet and strange, like roasted ivory. It is a clever trick, and you can almost imagine the relief of discovering it by accident. You make your way toward a frozen river, where pieces of driftwood often collect. The ice gleams like glass, trapping bubbles of ancient air beneath the surface. You crouch and listen. The river groans, deep and alive beneath its frozen skin. Across the surface, you spot a scattering of branches, some twisted, some straight. You begin collecting them, arranging them by length in the snow. The repetition feels soothing, a slow meditation against the cold. Researchers have confirmed that early builders used such scavenged wood to reinforce shelters made primarily of bone or hide. Sometimes it served as ridge poles for entryways or as simple drying racks for food and clothing. To preserve it, people rubbed branches with animal fat to prevent splitting in the frost. You test that idea now, rubbing your thumb across the grain of the wood until it gleams faintly. No one fully agrees on how people transported enough timber for large structures when forests were scarce. Some believe they carried poles during migrations, treating them like heirlooms passed between generations. Others suggest they returned to the same sites each year, reusing existing frames. The truth is probably both. When you live inside a frozen world, recycling becomes a sacred act. You pause to rest. Sitting on a rock warmed slightly by the morning sunday, the light glances off the snow, dazzling and harsh. Your breath hangs in front of you like smoke. You wonder how many lives were shaped by the scarcity of wood, how that lack pushed people to invent shelters from whatever materials the earth offered. Necessity is a quiet teacher, but its lessons endure. A lesser-known discovery from a site in modern Ukraine revealed that people sometimes buried their precious wooden poles in pits when they moved on, returning years later to reuse them. The wood survived because the ground stayed frozen. You can almost picture that moment of reunion, a family digging through the frost to uncover old beams, their hands trembling with gratitude. You bundle your collected wood and tie it with sinew. The bundle is awkward, heavier than it looks. Each step back to camp becomes deliberate, your breath measured. You pass by old snowdrifts shaped like sleeping giants, and you remember how snow itself can be a friend now. The wood will reinforce the walls of your hide shelter, strengthen the door, maybe even frame a new hearth. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of distance faint salt, maybe from a faraway sea. You stop and close your eyes. The sound of the wind through the branches in your bundle is oddly musical. It hums, almost like a flute. The same sound must have whispered through prehistoric camps, a soft reminder of the forests left behind. Interpretations vary widely among archaeologists about how wood scarcity influenced human cooperation. Some suggest that small bands gathered specifically to share materials, forming temporary alliances in exchange for warmth. Others think trade routes stretched across icy plains, wood becoming a currency of survival. Whatever the case, you can feel in your bones that sharing would have been easier than freezing. When you reach your shelter again, the air inside feels warmer, the fire still faintly glowing from last night's embers. You add a few splinters of your precious wood and watch them catch. The smoke rises, sweet and steady. The crackle sounds almost like laughter, a brief echo of life inside the storm's silence. Outside, the snow begins to fall again, thin and fine. It lands softly on the dome, sealing it tighter, turning it into a mound of white calm. You lean back, the sound of burning wood filling your ears. For a moment, the cold feels far away, and you realize how deeply the human heart depends on small things. A handful of branches, a flicker of fire, a silence that finally feels safe. The following day begins with the distant echo of ice shifting on the horizon, a slow cracking that rolls through the valley like thunder buried beneath snow. You step out from the shelter and see pale sunlight breaking across the tundra. The air is still brittle, yet something in it feels patient, as if the storm has paused to listen. Ahead lies a ring of low stones half swallowed by frost, their tops etched with lichen. You walk toward them, drawn by a quiet curiosity you cannot explain. At first glance, the stones seem accidental, perhaps debris left by glaciers, but the more you study them, the more deliberate they appear. Each rock is positioned carefully, forming a near-perfect circle. Some lean slightly inward, others stand like teeth. You brush away snow and notice scorch marks near the center. Fire once lived here. Excavations have shown that such stone circles were common across Ice Age Europe, often serving both as the foundations of dwellings and as ceremonial spaces. It is widely accepted among archaeologists that these rings anchored hide or bone walls, creating sturdy barriers against the wind. Yet their symmetry and alignment with sunrise hint at something more than practicality. You feel it in your chest, the faint hum of intention. A curious discovery from a site near the Dnieper River revealed small fragments of red ochre scattered between the stones, perhaps pigment spilled during ritual. Some researchers believe these spots marked sacred spaces, where builders thanked the land before sealing their homes. Others think the color simply prevented slipping when the stones iced over. It is hard to tell which explanation feels more human. You kneel beside one of the stones, running your glove along its surface. It is smooth on one side, rough on the other, as though shaped by many hands. The warmth of the sun gives it a faint chill that seeps into your palm. You imagine people arranging these stones while snow drifted around their feet, laughing softly, calling to each other over the wind. There is ongoing debate about whether such circles represented community boundaries or temporary winter dwellings. Some evidence points to repeated rebuilding, the stones reused over generations like family heirlooms. Others argue that they were ritual grounds first, homes second, a place where the line between shelter and spirit blurred. You can almost hear the murmur of voices from long ago, low and rhythmic, mixing with the crackle of fire. You stand and walk slowly around the circle. The ground inside is slightly higher, packed from centuries of footsteps. The space feels intimate despite the emptiness. You close your eyes and picture a dome of hides rising above you, supported by bones and driftwood. The air would have been thick with smoke, the scent of tallow lamps and drying meat. Children would have played near the fire while elders traced lines in the dirt, explaining the turning of the seasons. Oddly enough, several of these stone circles were found close to burial sites. Archaeologists speculate that families may have built their winter shelters near the graves of ancestors, believing protection lingered in the frozen soil. You look again at the stones and feel their gravity, the way they seem to hold memory. Even silence here feels inhabited. According to modern studies of heat retention, low stone walls would have been ideal for stabilizing interior temperatures. They absorbed warmth from fire during the day and released it slowly through the night, a prehistoric form of thermal storage. You smile at the thought of people discovering such comfort without knowing the word for physics. Knowledge often grows from instinct, long before theory gives it names. A lesser-known find from another Ice Age site showed small holes drilled into some of the stones, as if for tying ropes or cords. Perhaps the hides were secured there, or perhaps something decorative hung in the doorway. A few researchers suggest the holes might have held carved wooden pegs shaped like animals, charms to guard against the cold. You imagine them swaying in the wind, faint silhouettes dancing at dusk. You take a step back and notice how the ring catches light differently on each side. The eastern stones glow gold while those to the west stay in shadow. That could not have been coincidence. Perhaps the builders wanted to mark sunrise during the shortest days, a fragile promise that warmth would return. Even now, the idea feels comforting. You sit on one of the larger rocks, your breath curling upward like incense. The wind carries the faint scent of pine from far away, a reminder that forests still exist somewhere beyond this white desert. You rest your hand on the stone again, feeling its steadiness. In this frozen world, permanence is a rare gift. Experts generally agree that such places blur the distinction between architecture and faith. To build was to pray. Each wall, each stone, each hearth was both protection and offering. You can sense it here, that unspoken gratitude between people and earth. The circle at your feet is not just ruin, it is the fossil of belief. As the light fades, snow begins to drift again, thin veils sliding across the stones. You stand and take one last slow turn around the circle. It feels wrong to leave, but the cold insists. Before you go, you scoop a handful of snow and press it gently against one of the rocks. A simple farewell, in the only language the Ice Age still remembers. You walk back toward your shelter. Behind you, the circle vanishes under a veil of falling snow, but its presence lingers. Even now, you can feel the faint warmth it once held, a reminder that long before temples or cathedrals, people worshipped by building walls strong enough to keep the wind at bay. By the time you reach the foothills, the wind has softened into a steady whisper. The landscape changes here, the open plains giving way to ridges of limestone rising from the snow like the spines of some ancient beast. Shadows fill the crevices, and the air feels different, thicker, touched by the scent of stone. You know what this means. Somewhere ahead lies the kind of shelter that required no building at all, only courage to enter. You follow a narrow track where snow has drifted shallow. Soon you find a dark gap at the base of a cliff, half hidden behind a curtain of ice. It exhales cold air, yet the sound that emerges is not entirely lifeless. The faint drip of water echoes from within. You kneel, touch the edge of the entrance, and feel a vibration like the heartbeat of the mountain. This is a cave, and for thousands of winters, caves like this were home. Archaeological evidence shows that some of the earliest modern humans in Europe took refuge in limestone caves during the coldest glacial periods. The natural insulation kept temperatures above freezing, and the overhangs shielded families from blizzards that would have erased surface dwellings. You imagine the relief of finding such a place after weeks of wandering the tundra, the feeling of stepping from chaos into stillness. You light a small torch and step inside. The flame flutters, throwing rings of gold against the damp walls. The ceiling arches low at first, then rises into a wide chamber. The floor is covered in old layers of ash and bone dust. You kneel and run your fingers through the powder, finding fragments of charcoal and tiny flecks of ochre. It feels like touching memory itself. Oddly enough, microscopic analysis of cave deposits has revealed that people sometimes scattered crushed shells or powdered minerals across the floor. Perhaps they did it to keep the surface dry, or maybe they simply liked the glittering reflection of firelight. You hold your torch closer and see how the walls shimmer with quartz. The light dances like water, and for a moment you forget the cold entirely. A few scholars remain uncertain whether caves were long-term dwellings or seasonal sanctuaries used only during harsh winters. Some sites show deep hearths and sleeping platforms carved into the rock, while others contain only temporary debris from brief stays. The truth may vary from one valley to another. You picture entire families sleeping close together beneath the same rocky arch that still shelters you now, their breath turning the darkness to mist. You move deeper, tracing the faint outline of handprints on the wall. The red pigment still clings after tens of thousands of years. The prints are small, delicate, layered atop one another as if each generation left its mark before moving on. It is widely accepted that such hand stencils served many purposes: identity, ritual, communication. To you, they look like quiet signatures of survival. A strange but charming discovery from one French cave showed that people used bundles of moss as early lamps, lighting them with fat from reindeer or horses. The soot patterns still cling to the ceiling, forming black halos where the flames once burned. You hold up your own torch and notice similar marks here, looping in graceful arcs like smoke frozen in time. You sit beside an ancient hearth, still visible as a ring of stones fused by heat. The smell of damp ash rises faintly. Researchers have confirmed that cave hearths were often maintained for years, their centers relit again and again until the ground turned glossy from repeated burning. Fire in these places was more than warmth. It was a symbol of continuity. Even after one family left, the next could rekindle the same flame and feel connected to those who came before. You close your eyes and imagine the sounds that once filled this space. Quiet murmurs, the the crack of fat on fire, the soft breathing of dogs curled near their owners. The acoustics of caves amplify even the smallest noises. Perhaps that is why so many early rituals took place here. A whisper can sound like a chant, a footstep like thunder. The darkness invites reverence. There is ongoing discussion among archaeologists about how people balanced comfort and danger in such shelters. Caves offered protection, but also the risk of flooding, predators, and smoke buildup. Yet they kept returning. Something about the Earth's heartbeat must have felt reassuring. Maybe it was not just safety they sought, but belonging. A lesser-known fact about some Ice Age caves is that families decorated them even when they were used only for brief stays. Carvings of animals, dots and lines appear near hearths, not in deep chambers. It suggests that art was part of daily life, not a distant ceremony. You imagine carving the outline of a horse into the wall while the fire crackles nearby, your child watching in fascination. The urge to create beauty within danger is one of humanity's oldest instincts. You set down your torch and sit quietly. The air is heavy, the silence immense. Somewhere deep inside the mountain, water drips rhythmically. Each drop sounds like a clock tick from a world that no longer exists. You breathe in, tasting stone and ash. For the first time, you understand why people called caves the Earth's womb. They gave birth to safety, to art, to memory. When you finally step back into daylight, snow has begun to fall again. The entrance glows faintly behind you, a golden mouth closing on its own breath. You pause, listening to the wind, and realize that above and below, life continues to echo in endless cycles. You pull your cloak tighter, leaving footprints that will vanish before nightfall. The cave keeps its secrets, but for a moment it shared them with you. By the third week of this long winter, your hands have learned to move with purpose. Each gesture, each motion of scraping, tying, or cutting feels older than thought itself. You sit outside your shelter one morning, the pale sun stretching across the snow, and spread your few precious tools in front of you. Flint, bone, sinew, wood, simple materials, but each one carries the weight of 100 generations. Archaeological records show that these early people turned necessity into art. Every tool was shaped by memory and muscle, passed from one hand to another like a quiet inheritance. Some of the earliest awls and scrapers found in frozen soil still hold traces of human fingerprints pressed into their handles. You imagine those hands guiding yours now, teaching you how to carve a living from the cold. You lift a shard of flint and turn it in the light. Its edges catch the sun like a blade of glass. With one quick tap of another stone, a flake leaps away, sharp as ice. You grin despite the sting in your fingers. The sound of napping echoes softly, rhythmic and hypnotic. That crisp click might be the oldest music of humankind. Oddly enough, some prehistoric scrapers were made from reused spearheads. When a weapon broke, its sharpness was reborn in a new form. The lesson feels clear enough even across millennia. Nothing is wasted when survival is the goal. You run your thumb along the flint's edge and feel its bite, perfect for slicing hides or shaving bones smooth. It is widely acknowledged by researchers that the toolkit of Ice Age builders was astonishingly diverse for its time. There were antler chisels for shaping ribs, bone needles for stitching hides, and hammerstones for breaking apart frozen soil. Each tool had a rhythm of use, a choreography that made the work almost graceful. You can feel it now, as you pierce a strip of leather, the motion steady, your breath matching the pattern. Some archaeologists still puzzle over the polished surfaces of certain tools. Were they shaped simply by wear, or deliberately smoothed for comfort? The question lingers like breath in cold air. You hold a bone handle and notice how perfectly it fits your palm, as though its maker thought about the pleasure of holding it as much as its purpose. Even amid survival, comfort had meaning. A curious discovery from a site in the Czech Republic revealed tiny carvings etched onto tool handles, spirals, dots, even small animal figures. No one knows if they were marks of ownership, prayers for safety, or moments of idle beauty. You imagine a builder pausing during a snowstorm, carving a pattern just to remember that beauty exists. You work until your fingers ache. The flint dust clings to your gloves, leaving faint grey stains. Around you, the snow reflects sunlight so bright it makes your eyes water. Still, you keep shaping, scraping, tying. Each completed tool feels like a promise to the future, a declaration that the world has not beaten you yet. Modern experimental archaeologists have tried recreating these instruments, and their results confirm what instinct already tells you. Efficiency was born from simplicity. A single well-made scraper can prepare dozens of hides before dulling. You picture ancient families gathered around the fire, everyone working together, one softening leather, another sewing seams, a child watching, learning without words. Some experts remain divided about whether toolmaking was primarily a male or female task. The evidence offers no clear answer. What seems more likely is that everyone contributed. In a blizzard, rolls melt like snow. You suspect that skill, not strength, decided who held the tools. You pause to rest, rubbing warmth into your hands. The air hums faintly with the distant sound of cracking ice from the river. You look at your small collection laid out before you and realize that each piece carries a different note in the song of survival. Together, they form a kind of orchestra. Flint's sharpness, bone's patience, sinew's strength, and your own breath keeping time. In a peculiar twist, traces of red pigment found on some tools suggest that people sometimes colored them before use. Maybe it helped them stand out in the snow, or perhaps it was symbolic, a small ritual before construction began. You take a piece of ochre from your pouch and smear a streak across your newest blade. The color glows against the grey stone, a thin line of warmth against the cold. As twilight spreads, you gather your tools and step inside your shelter. The fire crackles softly, the air heavy with the scent of hide and smoke. You lay the tools near the wall, close enough to feel the heat but not too near to warp. Their shadows dance on the dome, twisting like ghosts of mammoths across the surface. You sit back, watching the firelight play across your work. Every scraper, every needle, every knife is both ancient and personal. These are not just objects, they are extensions of thought, evidence that even in the harshest climates, people were creators as much as survivors. You think of future generations unearthing them, wondering who you were, what your life meant. You smile faintly at the thought and pick up your awl one last time, turning it between your fingers. It feels warm now, alive with use. You set it down gently and close your eyes. Outside, the snow falls in soft spirals. Inside, the hum of human ingenuity lingers, steady and eternal. By the next morning, the cold has sharpened again, the kind that makes air taste metallic. The wind moves like a restless spirit across the plain, scouring every open space. You stand at the edge of your camp and see a storm swelling in the distance, a grey wall rolling closer. There is no time to waste. Today will be about speed, precision, and unity. In the distance, figures move your people, your fragile tribe of winter survivors. Each one knows what must be done without being told. Years of instinct and repetition have turned survival into choreography. You walk toward them, your breath already frosting in your hair, and take your place among the builders. Archaeologists studying ancient campsites have found clear evidence of group labor. Large dwellings left behind tool clusters from several individuals, suggesting communal effort. The building of a shelter was never a solitary act. It was a test of rhythm, cooperation, and trust. You sense it now as others join you, their movements aligning with yours like verses in a song. One person drags branches, another carries hides, and another tends to the fire pit so that warmth will be ready when the structure closes. Children help too, gathering snow in baskets made of bark. There is no shouting, only quiet coordination, like a ritual that needs no words. You glance at their faces, red with windburn but focused, and you realize that teamwork itself is an ancient technology. A curious discovery at a site near the Don River showed overlapping footprints from multiple individuals moving in circles around a central hearth. The patterns suggest a practiced order, some building, others weaving, some perhaps guarding the perimeter. You look at the footprints forming in the snow around you now and feel history repeating. Some researchers remain divided about whether prehistoric leadership existed in structured form or rotated fluidly depending on need. The question lingers in academic circles, but here, hierarchy feels irrelevant. Whoever knows best takes charge for the moment, then steps aside when another skill becomes more crucial. Knowledge is the only authority. You grip a hide and pull it taut, while another person drives a peg of frozen bone into the ground. The cord creaks as it tightens. Every muscle in your arms burns, but the motion feels oddly comforting. This is what it means to belong to something larger than yourself. The wind gusts, trying to unmake what you are building, but hands rise together to hold it firm. Experts have found traces of coordinated repairs in old Ice Age dwellings. Hearths were recentered, broken ribs replaced, walls thickened from inside rather than outside. That implies planning and shared memory. You realize these structures were not just shelters, they were living archives, shaped by many minds and many storms. Oddly enough, some researchers have identified evidence of communal singing during construction. Small bone flutes and rhythm stones found near work areas suggest that music accompanied labor. You can imagine it now, a low hum rising above the wind, simple melodies to steady breath and keep timing. You find yourself humming without thinking, and others join in. The rhythm makes the work lighter. No one fully agrees on what role gender or age played in these tasks, but traces of children's footprints near building sites hint that everyone contributed. Even the smallest hands mattered. You notice one child now, passing you a small cord of sinew, grinning despite the cold. You nod, and together you tie another seam. The future, you think, always begins with tiny hands. Hours pass. The storm edges closer, the sky a shifting curtain of grey. The temperature drops, yet your body stays warm from motion. Around you, the structure rises, walls curving inward, the roof layered with snow for insulation. The firekeeper calls out softly, and smoke begins to drift upward. You smell the promise of warmth. A lesser-known theory suggests that group shelter building also served as social glue, reinforcing kinship through shared labor. Every gesture became a kind of language. When you look at your companions now, you see that language alive. A nod, a touch, a passing glance saying, "Hold here, tighten there, almost done." You do not need speech. Rhythm is enough. As the last hide is secured, the first flakes of the approaching storm begin to fall. You crawl inside with the others. The space feels smaller than usual but filled with quiet energy. The fire is lit, and its glow paints everyone in shades of amber and red. Outside, the wind roars, but the dome stands firm. Inside, breaths slow in unison, each exhale misting toward the roof before fading into warmth. Some experts have proposed that such collective acts of creation shaped human empathy. Cooperation in the face of cold may have trained our species to value togetherness above all else. Sitting here among your tribe, you feel that theory breathing beside you, as real as the heat of the fire. The storm builds for hours, shaking the dome, but no one flinches. People murmur softly, sharing dried meat, mending cords, feeding the fire. The sound of the wind outside becomes almost musical, a drumbeat reminding you that the world is still vast and dangerous, yet somehow you are winning. When sleep comes, it arrives quietly, layered over exhaustion and satisfaction. You look around one last time before closing your eyes. Faces softened by firelight, hands resting, the steady rise and fall of breath. Humanity, small and fragile, but infinite in its ability to work as one. The storm finally dies with the dawn, leaving a stillness so complete that it hums in your ears. When you push open the hide flap, the outside world looks reborn. The snow is smooth, untouched, glowing faintly pink in the early light. You breathe deeply. and the air bites at your lungs, but it feels clean, like something freshly made. Behind you, the shelter rustles as others stir. The night has passed safely, and that alone feels miraculous. You look back toward the dome, smoke trailing gently from the vent hole, and notice two small figures clambering up its side. Children, laughing in quiet bursts, their voices softened by the snow. One slips, the other pulls them back up, and both collapse in giggles. It strikes you then how vital laughter must have been during those long winters. It keeps fear from settling too deep. Archaeological findings from Ice Age family camps show smaller footprints clustered around adult work areas, proof that children were part of daily tasks rather than kept aside. They played, learned, and mimicked everything the adults did. It is widely accepted that survival skills were passed down through imitation long before formal teaching existed. You can almost see it happening. Little hands tying knots, scraping hides, shaping snow walls just for the joy of copying. A curious discovery in a Siberian site revealed tiny versions of tools, perfectly crafted but too small for practical use. They were likely toys, or perhaps training instruments for young builders. The detail is astonishing, proof that even in the hardest times, childhood had its place. You crouch now, sketching a small circle in the snow, and a child joins you, eager to understand what you are drawing. The urge to teach feels natural, almost automatic. There is ongoing debate among researchers about how childhood was experienced during the Ice Age. Some argue that it was short and harsh, cut off by the demands of survival. Others believe that play and creativity were constant companions, essential for developing the flexibility needed to adapt. The truth, like snow, probably shifted with the weather, hard in some years, soft in others. You sit beside the children as they sculpt lumps of snow into shapes. One makes a tiny animal, its ears sharp and perfect. The other builds a small wall, then hides behind it, pretending to guard against invisible beasts. Their laughter echoes against the cliffs, and even the ravens circling overhead seem to pause to listen. Oddly enough, several Ice Age burials of young children have been found adorned with beads, shells, and ochre, suggesting that families valued them not just as future workers but as beings deserving honor. You think about how delicate those beads must have been to string, and how they gleamed even in dim firelight. To decorate a child in such a way was not just love, it was a declaration of hope in a world built on uncertainty. Researchers have confirmed that stories often revolved around teaching. Elder voices carried lessons about building shelters, tracking animals, predicting weather. But these were not lectures. They were tales told beside the fire, full of characters, laughter, and cautionary twists. You imagine a parent pointing to the shadows on the wall, telling a story about a clever builder who tricked the wind, while children's eyes glowed with wonder. A lesser-known theory suggests that children's play shaped the evolution of technology itself. The act of pretending, of imagining new uses for familiar things, may have sparked innovations. When a child used a bone as a pretend hammer or a stick as a roof support, they rehearsed the experiments that adults would later make real. You watch the children's miniature snow dome and realize they are inventing the future one handful at a time. You stand and stretch, the cold nibbling at your fingertips. The rest of the group has begun to emerge, smiling at the sight of the small builders. Someone tosses them scraps of hide to use as roofs, and soon the play grows into collaboration. The children's tiny shelter becomes the model for a new windbreak at the camp's edge. Play becomes practice. Imagination becomes architecture. No one fully agrees on whether prehistoric societies treated their young gently or strictly, but the evidence of toys and care in burials suggests affection and pride. You see it in the way one elder now brushes snow from a child's hair, murmuring softly. The tenderness feels timeless. The morning wears on. The children wander near the river's edge, collecting smooth stones, while the adults mend cords and scrape hides. The air fills with the quiet rhythm of work and laughter blending together. The snow reflects the light so brightly that everyone squints, faces glowing as if warmed by the Sunday. In a peculiar detail recorded at several Ice Age sites, pairs of footprints, one large, one small, are often found side by side, moving in the same direction. They might mark a parent guiding a child, or perhaps an older sibling leading the way through the drifts. You glance at the trail the children leave now and feel a soft tug in your chest. It is a pattern that has never changed. By afternoon, the little ones tire, curling up near the fire to nap. Their cheeks are flushed pink, their breath slow and even. You cover them with a strip of hide and sit watching as smoke curls upward. The quiet feels sacred. The world may be frozen, but life within this dome is warm and breathing. Outside, wind picks up snow in gentle spirals, reshaping the ground where they played. The marks of their games fade almost instantly, but that seems fitting. In the Ice Age, nothing stayed forever except the knowledge passed from one small hand to another. You look around at your people and realize that survival is not a battle, it is a lineage of learning. You close your eyes and listen to the soft sound of sleep and snow, blending perfectly together. The future, you think, is already safe inside these walls. By the time the next moon rises, your small group has begun to move again. The sky clears, revealing stars so sharp they seem to cut the night in two. You follow the migration routes of reindeer, heading toward valleys where the wind breaks and rivers run shallow. The snow crunches underfoot, a slow rhythm that steadies the mind. You carry your memories of shelters behind you, but ahead lies another landscape, another way of building. Migration has always been part of the human story. Archaeological findings show that as glaciers advanced and retreated, people followed the animals they hunted, moving thousands of miles across continents. The shelters they built changed with every climate, adapting to new materials and rhythms. You imagine that long road across Eurasia, from the wide steppes to the forests of the east, then onward to the bridge of ice that once connected continents. The wind grows sharper as you descend toward a frozen river. Your people stop at the bank, studying the land. Across the water stretch hills dotted with scrub and stone. It looks desolate, but you have learned to see potential where others would see emptiness. Beneath those hills might be caves, and in the hollows between them, places to build. The group begins to move again, crossing the ice one cautious step at a time. It is widely acknowledged by archaeologists that the human expansion into new territories during the last ice age required constant adaptation. Tools, clothing, and shelter designs evolved as swiftly as the weather changed. Where mammoth bones vanished, people turned to driftwood and turf. Where snow thinned, they built with stone. The ingenuity of survival was never limited by geography. Oddly enough, remnants of huts found in what is now Alaska show patterns nearly identical to those in Europe, despite the vast distance between them. Some were circular, others oval, but all shared the same low entrances and thickly insulated walls. It is as though knowledge traveled not only with feet but with stories. You imagine one traveler teaching another, long before language as we know it, perhaps through gesture and imitation. Some experts remain divided on how much cultural contact existed between these migrating bands. Did they exchange ideas across generations? Or did similar conditions simply produce similar solutions? The question lingers, as open as the sky above you. But one truth stands firm. When faced with cold and hunger, the human mind becomes endlessly inventive. You stop near a slope where wind has carved the snow into ridges. The ground here is firm, littered with small stones, a perfect place to rest and rebuild. Others begin to unpack the hides and poles carried on sleds. The air fills with soft conversation, the rhythmic clack of flint, and the occasional bark of a dog shaking frost from its coat. According to researchers studying migration patterns, groups of this era often return to known sites year after year. Each journey was both departure and homecoming. The marks of old fires guided them, and bones left in the soil became landmarks. You look around and wonder if this is one of those sacred returnings, if the ash beneath the snow remembers other winters, other footsteps. A peculiar detail uncovered in one ancient camp revealed the remains of a shelter built over a buried hearth, its center still warm when the next group arrived. They had built directly atop it, perhaps believing the lingering heat carried luck. You glance at your companions as they clear snow from the ground, and the idea makes sense. Warmth is too precious to waste, even if it comes from ghosts. By nightfall, the new dwellings take shape. This time, hides are stretched over a frame of poles arranged like ribs of a fish, their tips tied together at the top. The design feels lighter than the mammoth bone domes, easier to pack and rebuild. The air inside smells of wood, smoke, and fur. Outside, the snow falls softly, muffling every sound. A few archaeologists have proposed that such mobile shelters influenced later nomadic structures like yurts and tipis. The logic is simple. Portability means survival when food moves faster than you can chase it. You picture entire families folding their homes like enormous breathing tents, carrying them across frozen rivers and plains. It is not just endurance, it is elegance. As the fire grows inside your shelter, shadows ripple across the walls. You listen to the quiet talk of your companions, each voice steady and warm. Someone hums a tune learned far to the west, and another joins in with a melody from the north. The harmony is rough but soothing, proof that distance can fade when people share warmth. No one fully agrees on whether early migrants thought of themselves as wanderers or as people who simply lived everywhere. Maybe there was no such distinction then. You look through the flap at the vast white world and realize that home is not a single place. It is the ability to make one wherever you stop long enough to breathe. You lie back, your head against a rolled hide. The walls creak gently in the wind, the fire sighs, and your people settle around you. Somewhere beyond this valley, other groups are doing the same thing at this very moment. Across continents of ice, fires glow inside domes of hide and bone, each one a small sun defying the endless night. You close your eyes, feeling your body sink into the warmth. The migration will continue tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Yet for now, you are still, wrapped in fur and belonging. The snow outside whispers its soft song of continuity, and you sleep knowing that humanity is on the move, carrying its fragile light across the frozen earth. The morning begins with a thin mist rising from the valley floor, turning the world into a ghostly sea of light. The cold presses gently against your cheeks as you wake, but your breath feels steady now. You step outside your shelter and watch the mist drift, swirling between low mounds of snow. For a moment, everything is silent except the slow crunch of your boots. Then, beneath that stillness, you hear something else, the faint hollow thud of ground that is not entirely solid. You kneel and press your palm to the surface. It gives slightly, a pocket of earth insulated by layers of frozen turf. The realization strikes you like a whisper from the past. Beneath the snow, there may be room to dig, a way to hide not just from wind but from the very cold itself. You call to the others, and soon they gather, eyes bright with curiosity. Archaeological evidence suggests that in the harshest parts of the Ice Age, some groups dug semi-subterranean shelters, sinking their homes partway into the earth. These dwellings, discovered from Siberia to northern Canada, offered protection from the brutal surface winds. The soil acted as insulation, keeping temperatures stable even when blizzards raged above. You imagine the relief of descending into that quiet darkness, the earth holding you like a patient guardian. You choose a spot near a ridge where the ground slopes gently. Using bone shovels and antler picks, you begin to carve through the frozen crust. The sound is steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat you can hear through the soil. Each strike sends tiny crystals flying into the air, catching the weak sunlight. The deeper you go, the warmer it feels, a strange comfort that hums through your muscles. Oddly enough, some of these ancient dugouts contained what appear to be floor coverings made from woven reeds. How people found or crafted them in such barren regions remains uncertain, but they would have provided softness and warmth beneath sleeping hides. You pause to picture it, an underground chamber lined with reeds and fur, lit by the orange pulse of a small fire. It feels almost luxurious. There is ongoing debate about whether these structures were permanent or seasonal. Some were clearly abandoned after a few winters, while others show signs of repair and long-term use. The truth probably varied with the herds and the cold. Still, each time you swing your pick into the earth, you can sense that the people who invented this idea were not merely surviving. They were mastering the landscape, reshaping it to suit their bodies and dreams. By midday, the pit is waist-deep. The walls gleam with moisture, streaked with frozen roots that hang like threads of glass. You and the others begin to line the interior with slabs of stone, stacking them carefully to form a circular wall. The stones click softly together, each one fitting with satisfying precision. When the floor is smoothed with packed snow and moss, you can almost feel the temperature rise. According to studies of Ice Age soil layers, the temperature inside such sunken dwellings could remain near freezing but rarely dropped below it, even during severe storms. That tiny difference meant survival. You stand at the edge of your work, breath steaming, and feel a flicker of pride. The earth itself has become part of your home. A peculiar discovery at a site in the Russian Arctic revealed that some subterranean homes had tunnels connecting living chambers to storage pits. The design kept food frozen yet accessible. You share this thought aloud, and soon everyone is digging small side chambers. The rhythm of tools and breathing fills the valley, a symphony of endurance. You pause to drink from a pouch of melted snow, the water biting cold down your throat. When you look up, the mist has lifted, revealing the sun as a pale disk behind thin clouds. The world gleams with that strange beauty that only deep winter knows. You realize that this hidden dwelling will soon vanish beneath snow, invisible to anyone passing by. It will look like nothing, yet inside, it will hold life. Experts generally agree that such shelters mark one of humanity's great leaps in understanding the environment. By burrowing instead of building upward, people reversed the usual instinct to stand above the land. They learned to merge with it, to let it cradle them. You crouch inside your half-finished pit and feel that truth settling in your bones. The earth is not enemy or obstacle, it is collaborator. Oddly, one excavation revealed small bones carved into shapes resembling birds, buried in the walls of these dwellings. No one knows why. Perhaps they were charms to invite spring, or simply a gesture of gratitude to the creatures that endured the same cold. You glance at a feather caught in your glove and tuck it into the wall. It feels right to give something back. When the chamber is finally complete, you crawl inside. The ceiling is low, just high enough to sit upright. The air is still, holding a faint scent of soil and stone. You light a small lamp, and the flame's glow turns the walls gold. The sound of wind fades until it is only a faint murmur above your head. Here, in the belly of the frozen ground, the storm's power ends. You sit in silence, listening to the slow drip of thawing ice and the faint crackle of the lamp. The warmth spreads gradually, seeping into your hands and face. You close your eyes and feel something rare in this endless winter: peace. The kind that comes from knowing you have made the cold itself your ally. Outside, snow begins to fall again, layering over the roof until the shelter disappears into the landscape. From above, no one would know it exists. Yet below, in this small cocoon, you breathe steadily, surrounded by earth and quiet. Humanity, you realize, has learned to live not just upon the world, but within it. By the next sunrise, the air has turned crisp and still, and frost clings to every surface like spun glass. You wake inside the earthen shelter to the faint sound of someone stirring the fire. A thin column of smoke curls toward the vent, and its warmth touches your face like a blessing. You stretch your legs and realize that the world above is colder than anything inside this small chamber. The earth is holding you gently, its quiet patience wrapping around your bones. You crawl toward the entrance, push aside the snow plug, and peer out. The light is pale, the sky washed in silver. Around you, other shelters dot the valley like soft mounds. From their vents, wisps of smoke rise lazily, proof that your people survived another night. The smell of burning fat lingers in the air, mixing with the sweetness of cold. For a long moment, you stand there in silence, grateful. Archaeological studies show that once people began to master warmth, food storage followed naturally. Fire and sustenance became twin pillars of survival. You walk toward the communal pit where slabs of frozen meat are kept beneath snow and stone. The ground crunches underfoot, and the wind sighs softly through the tall grass frozen in place. When you lift a slab of reindeer meat, frost sparkles on its surface like sugar. Oddly enough, some Ice Age settlements show evidence of raised platforms built from bone or wood, where meat was dried beside the heat of fires. The practice kept predators at bay and allowed smoke to cure the flesh. You can almost smell it now, that faint, tangy sweetness of smoked meat mingling with the earthy scent of burning pine resin. Even hunger becomes art when guided by necessity. You carry a few pieces back to the fire pit inside the main chamber. The coals glow softly, and the flicker of flame paints gold onto the curved walls. Around the fire, others are working too. Someone mends a net woven from sinew, another sharpens a bone blade. Every motion seems part of the same rhythm, a shared understanding of purpose. It is widely agreed among historians that the organization of daily life in prehistoric shelters revolved around food and fire. Meals were not only nourishment, but also structure, the heartbeat of the day. You slice the meat into strips, hang them over the flames, and watch them darken slowly. The smell fills the air, comforting and rich. In a curious detail, uncovered at a site along the Rhine, archaeologists found fragments of clay near hearths that might have been used to line cooking pits. If true, it would mean that even before pottery, people experimented with transforming earth into tools for heat. You think of that as you turn the meat and pile fresh snow into a shallow stone basin, waiting for it to melt into water for soup. Some researchers remain uncertain about how early humans managed smoke within enclosed shelters, yet residues found on ceilings reveal deliberate airflow, showing that people carefully adjusted vent holes, even shaping them to guide the draft. You glance at the vent above your head and smile. The ancestors who built this system understood balance without ever naming it. You reach for your pack and pull out a few dried berries, dark and shriveled but still sweet. Mixing them into the pot gives off a faint scent like wild honey. Others around you hum softly, the sound blending with the crackle of fire. It feels less like cooking and more like a ceremony of endurance. Every flavor, every gesture reminds you that survival can still hold grace. There is a quiet debate among anthropologists about when humans first began to think of food as more than fuel. Some believe it started right here, in the Ice Age, when shared meals became an act of comfort as well as sustenance. You can almost see it in the faces around you, the ease, the smiles, the warmth of belonging. Even in the harshest cold, people found ways to taste joy. A lesser-known observation from Arctic excavations revealed traces of herbs and roots mixed with animal fat inside ancient cooking stones. Whether these were used for flavor or medicine remains uncertain. You imagine someone experimenting with taste for the first time, maybe adding a leaf for curiosity's sake. The result must have felt like a revelation, a reminder that life could still surprise. The stew begins to bubble, releasing steam that carries the scent of smoke and sweet fat. Everyone leans closer, hands extended toward the fire. You hand out portions in shallow shells, the warmth seeping instantly into cold fingers. The first bite is always the best, rich and heavy with meaning. You feel it travel through you, spreading calm, anchoring you to the present. According to several studies, the communal meal was one of the earliest social rituals that bound people together. It required cooperation, sharing, and timing. Each person contributed something, whether food, fuel, or story. You watch as laughter ripples through the group, the first real laughter in days. It fills the chamber like sunlight. When the last bowl is emptied, someone adds new fuel to the fire. The flames brighten, pushing shadows back into the corners. You lean against the wall, full and content. Outside, snow begins to fall again, soft and slow. It does not matter. Inside this space, warmth has taken root. You glance around the chamber one more time before closing your eyes. The fire hums softly, the scent of cooked meat still sweet in the air. Tomorrow there will be new hunts, new shelters, new storms. But tonight, in this small refuge carved from earth and effort, you have everything you need. When night falls again, the air outside grows restless. The moon rises thin and pale, painting the snow in shades of silver and blue. Inside your shelter, the firelight flickers across the curved walls, turning every shadow into a living shape. The others have quieted after the meal, some already asleep, but a few remain awake, sitting close to the flame. Their faces are thoughtful, eyes half closed, as if listening to something that isn't quite sound. You watch one of the elders reach into a pouch of ash and herbs, sprinkling a small handful onto the fire. The smoke curls upward in ribbons that twist and shimmer, filling the space with a scent both sharp and sweet. The air feels heavier, charged with a quiet focus. You realize this is not just warmth now. This is something older, something between prayer and dream. Archaeological evidence from Ice Age sites hints at small, secluded structures near main camps that may have been used for ritual rather than shelter. These circular huts, lined with painted stones or carved bones, contain traces of pigment and burned herbs. It is widely accepted that shamans or spiritual leaders used them to bridge the world of the living with the unseen. You can almost picture it now, the flicker of lamplight, the slow rhythm of chant, the smell of resin thick in the air. A curious discovery from a site in southern France revealed the skull of a bear placed at the center of such a dwelling, surrounded by red ochre and fragments of shell. Some interpret this as an offering, others as a symbol of power or guidance. You look at the fire before you and imagine the same gesture repeated through countless winters, the attempt to speak to the storm, to the wind, to whatever forces held sway over the cold. No one truly knows what those ancient ceremonies meant. Some experts remain divided, suggesting they could have been healing rituals, initiation rites, or simple acts of gratitude. The ambiguity itself feels fitting. When the world is so vast and merciless, it makes sense to create meaning from its silence. The elder beside the fire begins to hum, a low tone that seems to vibrate through the floor. It is not a song exactly, more a pulse of sound that echoes inside your chest. Another voice joins in, higher, weaving around the first. Soon the two merge into something that feels like wind and heartbeat combined. The fire pops softly, releasing sparks that float upward like tiny stars. According to ethnographers who have studied later Arctic cultures, rhythmic chanting helped regulate breathing and warmth during long, cold nights. Perhaps the same was true here. The sound unites the group, slows the pulse, and makes the cold outside seem less infinite. You close your eyes and let the vibration settle into you, the rhythm blending with the whisper of air through the vent above. Oddly enough, traces of powdered charcoal mixed with animal fat have been found painted in spirals on the inner walls of certain huts. When illuminated by firelight, the designs would appear to move, twisting and turning as if alive. You glance at the faint patterns etched in your own walls, lines that the builders might have drawn unconsciously while smoothing hides. In the shifting light, they seem to ripple, like waves or breath. There is an ongoing debate among scholars about whether early humans viewed shelter itself as sacred. Some believe that by enclosing fire within walls, they symbolically recreated the safety of the womb, a place where creation and survival met. Others think ritual spaces were separate from everyday dwellings. You sit in this warmth, watching the dance of flame, and realize that both ideas could be true. Every home in such a world is a small temple to endurance. The elder's hum fades into silence. For a long moment, no one moves. Then, with slow care, she takes a bone figurine from a pouch and sets it beside the fire. It is small, carved in the shape of a human with exaggerated limbs. The surface glows orange in the light. She whispers a few words that sound half like a song, half like a sigh, and you feel the hairs on your arms rise. A lesser-known finding from an Ice Age site in the Czech Republic revealed figurines buried beneath hearths, often female, sometimes headless, all coated in ochre. Some interpret them as fertility symbols, others as talismans against cold or misfortune. Perhaps each represented a prayer turned solid, something to hold when the world outside grew too large to comprehend. You find yourself breathing slower, matching the rhythm of the flames. The smoke has a sweetness now, and the air feels warm enough to blur thought. It occurs to you that rituals like this might have been as much about focus as faith, a way to center the mind, to remember humanity amid the frozen vastness. When the ceremony ends, the elder stirs the fire once more, letting sparks rise through the vent and vanish into the dark. She looks at you briefly, eyes calm and unreadable, then nods. No words are needed. You understand the message clearly enough. Warmth is not just in fire, but in spirit. As you lie back, staring at the roof, your thoughts drift between the rhythm of breathing around you and the fading hum of the chant. The flames slow to a steady glow. Outside, the wind begins again, brushing softly against the walls like fingers tracing old songs. Inside, you feel safe, held between earth and air, between dream and memory. You close your eyes, the faint smell of smoke still clinging to your skin, and drift into sleep. For the first time, the dark feels gentle. When morning light returns, it filters through the vent as a thin golden ribbon, stretching across the curved wall of the shelter. You blink awake to the soft crackle of fading embers and the scent of smoke still lingering from last night's ritual. For a moment, you are unsure if you dreamed the chanting or if it truly happened. Then you see the bone figurine resting beside the hearth, its edges warm from the fire, and you know it was real. Outside, the snow glitters under a pale Sunday. The air is still cold enough to sting your lungs, but the world feels strangely calm, as if the storm has grown tired of itself. You step outside quietly, careful not to wake the others. The valley stretches wide and bright, dotted with low shelters and curling trails of smoke. Somewhere nearby, a child laughs, and that sound feels like the truest proof of life. Archaeologists studying Ice Age sites often describe traces of daily life inside shelters, tools left near fires, bones carved into trinkets, and small piles of ash marking where people sat for warmth. These fragments tell a story not just of survival, but of emotion. The home was not simply protection from cold, it was the heart of belonging. You can feel that truth now as you walk among the shelters, each one a small universe of human warmth. Oddly enough, evidence from several excavations shows that people kept collections of personal objects, small stones, feathers, or teeth, arranged near sleeping spaces. No one can say for certain why. Perhaps they were charms, or keepsakes of loved ones, or simple tokens of beauty. You reach into your pouch and feel the smooth pebble you found by the river weeks ago, polished by your touch until it gleams. It feels like a heartbeat in your palm. A few researchers remain uncertain how family bonds functioned in such harsh conditions. Were these groups tied by blood or by necessity? The evidence offers few answers, yet what you see in the quiet gestures around you speaks more clearly than any artifact could. Someone tends another's wound. Someone shares dried meat with a neighbor. A woman hums softly while brushing snow from a child's fur hood. This is love in its earliest language, simple care made visible. It is widely recognized that these shelters also served as emotional sanctuaries. Within the walls of hide and bone, laughter replaced the wind's cry, and conversation pushed back the silence of the tundra. You can almost hear the echoes of countless stories told here, whispered during long nights while the fire painted shapes on the walls. Each story was a small fire of its own, keeping the mind warm when the body shivered. A curious discovery at one Ice Age site revealed impressions of hands pressed together on a clay surface, perhaps a shared signature or symbol of unity. The prints belonged to different individuals, one large and one small, likely parent and child. It is hard not to imagine that moment a pause in the endless work, a quiet decision to leave a mark that said, "We were here together." You return to your own shelter and sit near the fire. A friend passes you a bowl of thawed broth. The taste is simple but rich, heavy with smoke and marrow. You sip slowly, feeling warmth spread through your chest. Across the fire, two people are laughing softly, telling a joke you cannot hear, their eyes glinting with tired amusement. There is beauty in this ordinariness, this fragile peace held against the cold. Some anthropologists argue that intimacy itself was shaped by the Ice Age. When the world shrank to the size of a single dome, people learned to share space in harmony. The constant closeness taught patience, empathy, and perhaps love as we know it. You can sense that truth now in the gentle touches, the quiet cooperation, the way no one feels alone even when silence falls. A lesser-known finding from a cave in Spain revealed faint traces of pigment smeared on the lower walls near hearths, likely from people leaning back, touching the surface while resting or embracing. The warmth of the fire would have softened the earth, turning it into an accidental canvas of human contact. You look at the wall beside you and imagine those faint marks, the ghosts of gestures left by bodies huddled together. Outside, a group begins to prepare for the next hunt. The air fills with the familiar sounds of scraping, sharpening, and low talk. The rhythm feels comforting, steady as breathing. You hand your empty bowl back to your friend and step outside again. The sunlight catches on the snow, scattering diamonds across the valley. In the distance, smoke rises from another camp, a thin line connecting heaven and earth. It strikes you how fragile all of this is, yet how enduring. Every small kindness, every meal shared, every story told has carried humanity through ice and hunger. The shelters around you are not just constructions of hide and bone, they are cocoons of memory. You walk to the edge of the camp, looking out across the frozen plain. For a long time you stand there, feeling the wind tug gently at your hood. Then, as you turn back toward the shelters, you realize that inside those domes beats something stronger than fire. It is the pulse of connection, the quiet knowledge that warmth grows where hearts remain close. The storm will return someday, as it always does, but tonight, love itself is a shield. It begins as a distant tremor, barely perceptible through the thick hush of snow. You are kneeling near the fire, reshaping a cord of sinew, when the ground gives a faint, hollow sigh. At first, you think it is the sound of shifting ice from the river, but then it comes again, deeper this time, followed by the soft groan of tension in the walls. Every instinct in your body tightens. The storm is coming back, faster than anyone expected. You shout a warning, and immediately the camp erupts into motion. People move with the urgency of memory, knowing what this means. The wind that had slept for 2 calm days is waking again, gathering its anger across the plains. You can already hear its voice approaching, a dull, raw building behind the mountains. The air tastes metallic, charged with snow. Archaeological evidence shows that some Ice Age dwellings collapsed during sudden temperature shifts, or when wet snow piled too quickly on roofs. Many groups learned to reinforce their shelters before every major storm, checking supports and layering snow for extra insulation. You and your people do the same now, each person grabbing tools, hides, and spare poles. The wind arrives before the work is finished. The first gust hits like a physical blow, flinging snow sideways in a white fury. The hides flap violently, cords straining against their knots. You and 2 others press your weight against the outer wall, using your shoulders to brace it. The sound outside is deafening, a deep, endless roar, like the sky itself tearing apart. Oddly enough, excavations of collapsed shelters often reveal careful rebuilding layers, showing that early people treated destruction as part of the natural cycle. They did not despair, they rebuilt. You think of that now as snow begins to pile against the door, sealing you in darkness. The roof creaks, scattering bits of frost onto your hair. Someone calls out, and you answer, your voice barely audible. A few researchers remain uncertain how these ancient families prepared for disasters of this scale. Some argue they built secondary windbreaks using spare hides or mammoth ribs, while others think they moved into caves when the storms became too fierce. But when the fury of the blizzard hits, you realize there is no time for migration. The only path is to endure. You crawl toward the central pole, your fingers numb from cold. The fire sputters as snow forces its way through gaps in the vent. Quickly, you pile stones around the base to keep the draft steady. The room fills with the scent of wet hide and smoke. Sparks jump and vanish against the damp roof. The noise outside grows louder still, until it feels like the entire world has turned to wind. In a curious discovery at one site in Poland, archaeologists found layers of soot alternating with compacted snow, suggesting that people rebuilt their fires multiple times during a single storm. It must have been exhausting, this endless maintenance of flame against frost. You understand now what that felt like. The constant vigilance, the refusal to surrender even as the cold pressed harder. You shout again, checking on the others. A child whimpers, and someone wraps them tighter in furs. The sound steadies your heartbeat. There is life in that small voice, and that is reason enough to keep working. You crawl to the entrance, testing the snow blockage. The air is thin but breathable. You carve a narrow vent with a flint blade, careful not to let too much wind inside. According to modern simulations, these dome-shaped dwellings were remarkably resilient, distributing weight evenly so that snow reinforced them instead of breaking them. Still, when the storm howls this violently, no design feels safe. You whisper a short plea to the wind, not for mercy but for patience. If it must rage, let it rage quickly. Oddly, there are tales passed down in modern Arctic oral traditions of people singing to calm storms. No one knows if Ice Age builders did the same, but you hum softly anyway, a low note that vibrates in your chest. The rhythm steadies your breathing, gives your mind something to cling to. Soon another joins you, then another, until the entire shelter hums like a living instrument. Hours pass. Snow presses higher against the walls, muffling the sound until it feels like you are buried in cloud. The fire has burned low, but the air inside remains warm from so many bodies close together. You feel someone's hand brush yours and squeeze gently. The gesture is wordless, but it speaks volumes. You are not alone. There is an argument among historians about what made our ancestors so enduring. Some say it was tool-making, others say it was language. But in moments like this, the answer feels simpler. It was compassion, the instinct to reach for another hand when the world outside tried to erase you. The wind continues for hours, then begins to fade, as if it has run out of breath. The silence that follows feels heavier than noise. You wait before moving, afraid it might return. When at last you push open the door, snow cascades inside, glittering in the firelight. The world outside is unrecognizable. The camp has vanished beneath drifts taller than a person. You climb upward through the passage you carved, emerging into a world remade. The storm's fury has sculpted the land into smooth white waves. Here and there, the tips of poles poke through the snow, the only sign of the shelters below. The air is utterly still, the sky glowing faintly pink. You breathe in deeply, tasting calm for the first time in days. Behind you, others begin to dig upward, laughter breaking through exhaustion. One voice calls out a name, then another answers from beneath the snow. Relief ripples through the camp. Life has endured. Again. You stand at the edge of the mound, looking across the frozen horizon. It is hard to tell where the earth ends and the sky begins. Everything is white. Everything is quiet. Yet beneath that silence, the warmth of your people still burns. The storm may destroy, but it never wins. When the last shovelful of snow is cleared from the doorway, sunlight floods into the shelter like a slow-moving river of gold. The light feels strange after so many hours of storm. You squint, shielding your eyes, and for a moment everything glows: the snow outside, the smoke inside, the tired faces around you. The storm has passed, but it has changed the landscape completely. The old paths are gone, buried beneath new hills of ice. The time to move has come again. You step out into the open, boots sinking deep into the glittering crust. Behind you, your shelter stands half buried, its roof sparkling with frost. The others begin gathering supplies, shaking snow from furs, tightening the leather straps of their sleds. The air is bitter, but the wind has gone quiet. It is the kind of silence that follows great effort, heavy but full of peace. Archaeological evidence shows that many Ice Age communities lived in constant rhythm with the migration of animals. When the herds moved, the people followed, folding their shelters like portable worlds and carrying them across plains and rivers. You think about how many times your ancestors must have done this before you. Each departure carried both sorrow and relief. Sorrow for what was built, relief for what still waited ahead. Oddly enough, traces of ash and charcoal found miles apart sometimes match perfectly in composition, meaning that people carried embers from one camp to another rather than lighting new fires. They preserved the same flame, protecting it like a heartbeat. You crouch near the remains of your hearth now and collect a handful of glowing coals into a small pouch lined with moss. The warmth seeps into your hands. It feels like holding memory itself. Some researchers have wondered how portable dwellings evolved from heavy bone structures into the lighter, more flexible hide tents found in later sites. Theories differ, but most agree that necessity taught people to build homes that could walk beside them. You watch your companions disassemble the dome, folding hides carefully, stacking poles, tying bundles with sinew. What took hours to raise comes down in minutes. According to ethnographic parallels, such migration required remarkable planning. Nothing could be wasted. Poles served as sled runners, hides became both roof and blanket, sinew cords doubled as fishing lines. Every object lived many lives. You pack your tools into a small leather pouch, listening to the rhythmic thump of snow being cleared. It is like the heartbeat of the journey beginning again. In one particularly well-preserved camp in Central Europe, archaeologists found deep ruts pressed into ancient soil, suggesting sleds pulled by humans or dogs. Those grooves still run in parallel lines today, frozen into the earth as proof of movement. You look at the dogs circling the camp, tails high and eager. They sense the coming travel, their breath rising in quick bursts of mist. There is a quiet argument among historians about when dogs first became companions. Some think they were adopted for protection, others for help with hunting or hauling. Yet standing here, you can feel another reason. The sound of their paws in the snow, the warmth of their bodies near the fire, the loyalty in their eyes, all these must have mattered as much as any practical purpose. Companionship itself is survival. A peculiar detail recorded in several sites shows paw prints pressed alongside human footprints, heading in the same direction, perfectly aligned. That simple pattern says everything. It tells of shared roads, shared hunger, shared warmth. You glance at your own footprints now and smile as a dog trots beside you, its fur dusted with frost. The group begins to move just as the sun climbs higher. The snow underfoot gleams so bright it feels like walking on light. Each person carries a part of the camp. Hides folded neatly, bundles of meat, carved tools, and the ember pouch glowing faintly inside your cloak. The path ahead is uncertain, but that has never stopped you. Some experts remain divided on whether these journeys followed fixed routes or shifted with each season's whim. Perhaps both are true. The landscape itself is alive, and it teaches in different ways every year. You read it like a map written in snow, where the wind lies low, where the trees huddle, where the animals pass. Instinct is your compass, patience your guide. A curious discovery from a Siberian site revealed layers of compacted snow alternating with ash bands along an ancient migration corridor. That means people stopped repeatedly at the same points, leaving trails that became invisible under the next year's frost. You imagine those paths like faint veins running across the frozen world, connecting the living to the memory of those who walked before. The day stretches long. By dusk, your group reaches a rise overlooking a valley glazed with ice. A frozen river winds through it, glittering in the fading light. It will make a good place to rest. You set down your pack and unfold a section of hide to form a quick windbreak. The fire catches easily with your saved embers, and the flame grows, golden against the blue twilight. Around you, others begin to unpack, spreading out the simple tents. It is quieter now. No chatter, just the familiar rhythm of work. The snow reflects the light in soft halos, turning the camp into a constellation of small suns. Above, the sky deepens into violet, stars beginning to shimmer. You sit near the fire and feed it a piece of dry wood. The dogs settle beside you, their breath steaming. Behind you, the snow domes of the old camp are already fading from sight, swallowed by the storm's handiwork. Ahead lies only distance, but you are ready. The idea of home now lives in motion, not in walls. As the first stars pierce the horizon, you look at the faces around you, tired, determined, glowing softly in the firelight. The wind whispers faintly through the valley, carrying scents of pine and frost. The road will be long, but you feel light inside. Everything you need travels with you: fire, tools, laughter, and the memory of warmth. You close your eyes for a moment and listen to the crackle of flame. Tomorrow the journey will continue. Tonight the earth is quiet and the stars are kind. The valley wakes slowly under a muted dawn. The air is still. The sky, a soft wash of grey, and frost crystals sparkle like dust on every surface. You stir the fire's remains, feeding it a few splinters of wood until it sighs back to life. The warmth spreads in lazy waves, touching your face, easing the stiffness from your hands. All around, the camp begins to stir. The soft jingle of bone tools, the muted murmur of people stretching awake. One of your companions, an older man with eyes the color of smoke, kneels beside you to sharpen a blade. The sound of stone against flint is slow and deliberate, like breathing. You watch the sparks jump and fade, each one a tiny star in the dim light. There is something peaceful about this ritual, a daily act that requires both focus and care. Archaeological evidence shows that Ice Age people maintained their tools as carefully as we might tend to family heirlooms. Every edge mattered, every repair carried memory. A blade that had saved you once was never discarded lightly. It is widely recognized that tool-making was not only skill but relationship, a partnership between hand and material. You can feel that truth now as you take up your own scraper and begin to mend its dull edge. A curious detail uncovered in a dig near Lake Baikal revealed tools decorated with tiny incised lines that appear purely ornamental. Some experts believe these were marks of ownership. Others think they were simple gestures of pride. Perhaps they were both. Even in a world of scarcity, the human impulse to beautify endured. You imagine a person long ago pausing amid exhaustion, etching a small design into a blade just to make it theirs. As the day brightens, the group gathers to prepare for the next stage of travel. The air smells of smoke and fur, a familiar perfume of survival. Dogs shake themselves free of frost, and the sleds creak as they are loaded. You walk among the group, checking bindings, tightening cords. Each gesture feels practiced, inherited. The fire of the morning now glows not just in the coals, but in every movement, in every shared glance. Some scholars remain divided about the emotional life of these early people. Did they feel affection as we do, or was survival too demanding for tenderness? The question fades into meaninglessness when you see the way one hunter ties an extra pelt around a companion's shoulders, or how someone whispers to a dog before setting off. Affection, in its simplest form, has always been the first form of protection. The sky begins to clear, revealing a faint blue horizon. The air hums softly with cold. You move in line with the others, following the frozen river. The sound of sleds gliding over snow mingles with the crunch of boots, a rhythm steady enough to ease the mind. You think of the countless feet that have walked this way before, tracing invisible lines through history. According to recent studies, Ice Age tools grew smaller and more precise as people moved into harsher territories. It was efficiency born of necessity. Yet the craftsmanship also became more refined. Each flake of stone, each groove in bone, carried evidence of thought and tenderness. It is strange to imagine tenderness in flint, but that is what you feel in your hand now. A weapon made with care, not cruelty. Oddly enough, at some ancient sites, archaeologists have found caches of tools deliberately buried together, as if retired rather than discarded. Perhaps they were broken, or perhaps their owners moved on and left them as offerings to the earth. You wonder if objects can absorb memory the way people do, holding fragments of warmth from the hands that shaped them. You stop for rest near a low ridge. The air is thin here, the wind sharp, but the view is wide and humbling. The land stretches in every direction, a tapestry of white and shadow. You kneel in the snow, draw your flint blade once more, and study its polished surface. The reflection of the sky glimmers faintly across its edge, a cold mirror of your own persistence. Some researchers have suggested that technology and tenderness were never separate. To make something with patience, to shape it to fit the hand perfectly, was already an act of care. You look around at your companions, each repairing, mending, crafting, and realize that every gesture here is a quiet defiance of the cold. A lesser-known discovery from a site in northern France revealed that groups often carried shared toolkits used by everyone. There was no strict ownership. A scraper made by one person might be used by another weeks later. Such sharing speaks of deep trust, the kind that forms only when people live on the edge together. You glance at the tool in your hand, knowing it might outlive you, passed on to another, carrying your touch into the future. By afternoon, clouds roll in again, soft and low, muting the light. The group stops to build a small windbreak. Hides stretch across poles, snow pressed along the base for insulation. You help patch a seam, your fingers moving with practiced rhythm. Inside the temporary shelter, the air grows warmer almost immediately. Someone begins to hum, a slow tune carried from childhood. Others join in, voices overlapping in a melody both ancient and familiar. It occurs to you that song and craftsmanship serve the same purpose. They keep the hands moving, the spirit steady. Each flint, each chord of melody, each quiet breath is a reminder that to create is to endure. As night approaches, the wind stills again. You sit by the small fire, the tool you sharpened resting beside you. Its edge glints faintly, reflecting the flame. Around you, laughter stirs softly in the half-dark. The cold presses close, but it feels less menacing now. You are surrounded by proof that the human heart, even in its earliest form, could shape warmth from stone. By the next morning, the air has changed again. It carries a hum, a low vibration that seems to come from the land itself. The wind is calm, but alive, brushing softly over the valley, whispering around every ridge and hollow. When you step outside, the sound moves around you, slipping between your ears like music. For a moment you stand still, eyes closed, letting it fill you. The wind is not cruel today, it sings. The landscape stretches wide and pale under a pearly sky. Your shelter, half buried in snow, stands like a mound of quiet breath. From its rounded roof, snow has drifted into delicate curves. As the wind slides across those shapes, it creates tones soft, haunting, and melodic. You realize what the old ones might have known long ago. Even shelters can sing if you listen closely enough. Archaeologists have noted how certain Ice Age dwellings were designed with careful attention to wind direction. Entrances faced leeward, walls curved gently to deflect gusts. This was not only practical but acoustic. The structures muffled roaring storms and replaced them with a steady hum that could soothe the mind through long nights. You hear that hum now, faint but steady, like a voice humming under its breath. Oddly enough, in some excavated sites, small holes have been found near the tops of walls, not for smoke but likely for air and sound. Researchers believe these openings might have created flute-like tones as the wind passed through them. You tilt your head and imagine that music floating through darkness, keeping sleepers calm while the cold howled outside. The idea makes you smile. The first lullabies may have come not from people but from the walls themselves. According to several modern acoustic experiments, the rounded shapes of bone and hide structures carry sound differently than rigid stone or wood. They soften it, bending it into warmth. Inside such a dwelling, voices echo without sharpness, blending together like overlapping waves. You remember nights by the fire when laughter mixed with the wind's rhythm, forming something close to harmony. A curious discovery at a Ukrainian site revealed that mammoth bone huts were sometimes arranged in clusters, forming what might have been an intentional soundscape. The placement of entrances created alternating currents of air that could produce a low drone. Some scholars think this might have been accidental, while others suspect it was deliberate, a way to let the camp itself hum like a guardian spirit. You can almost hear it now, ghostly and slow, drifting across the frozen plain. There is ongoing discussion among researchers about whether early humans designed their homes for emotional as well as physical comfort. The evidence, though sparse, suggests they did. A space that sings softly in the wind does more than shield the body. It soothes the heart. You kneel, brushing snow from your doorway, and listen as the pitch changes with each movement of your hand. The shelter seems to breathe with you. A lesser-known fact about these dwellings is that sound was also used for communication. Some groups placed flint chimes or suspended bones outside entrances, letting the wind strike them to signal when others approached. The delicate clinking must have sounded like whispers through glass. You reach into your pouch, pull out a small fragment of antler, and tie it to a string of sinew above your doorway. When the next breeze comes, it taps gently, a soft heartbeat against the cold. Inside, the air feels thick with peace. The fire crackles quietly, its sound softened by the curved walls. You lie back, eyes half closed, listening. The flame snaps, the walls murmur, and the wind outside adds its slow rhythm. Together they weave a melody older than speech. It is not the kind of music one remembers, but the kind that settles into the bones and stays there. Some scientists studying sound in ancient spaces have recreated how firelight and acoustics together affect emotion. The results are startling. Rhythmic flicker and low-frequency hum can slow breathing and heart rate, inducing calm. You do not need the science to know it works. You can feel your pulse slowing, your thoughts melting into the quiet. Oddly, one excavation in northern France uncovered small hollow bird bones near hearths, shaped like simple flutes. The spacing of holes matched notes that could blend with the pitch of the wind outside. Imagine it, a family gathered in warmth, a single figure playing softly while snow swirled beyond the door. It is one of the earliest proofs that sound was more than function, it was comfort. You sit up and feed the fire, the sparks lifting like golden dust. The room glows amber, and the hum outside deepens with the evening air. You think of how many generations might have fallen asleep to this same sound, their fears soothed by wind and rhythm. Experts generally agree that these early shelters represented humanity's first attempt to shape the sensory world, not just to survive but to feel safe within it. Every curve of bone, every seam of hide, every vent hole carried purpose beyond engineering. It was empathy translated into architecture. You lean back, closing your eyes again. The fire dims, but the song continues, a whisper through the snowdrifts and bone frames. The sound shifts gently, like breathing, like the pulse of the land itself. For a long while you simply listen, letting the world's oldest lullaby carry you towards sleep. The shelter sings softly around you, a reminder that even in a frozen age, humanity built warmth not just from fire, but from harmony. The days lengthen almost imperceptibly, the sun climbing a little higher each morning, its light spilling across the frozen plain with a softer gold. You begin to notice changes. The snow crust loosens beneath your boots. The air no longer bites quite so deep. In the distance, rivulets of meltwater thread through the ice like veins. Winter is weakening, though it will not admit it yet. You sit on a ridge overlooking the valley. Below, your people move quietly, packing hides and tools, checking their sleds. The rhythm of migration returns, but something feels different this time. The air smells of thaw, of soil hidden too long. Even the wind sounds different, less like a growl, more like a sigh. You realize that this is what the end of an age must feel like. Not dramatic, but gradual, a whisper turning into silence. Archaeological layers show that around the close of the last ice age, climates began to warm, slowly transforming everything that humans had known. Glaciers retreated, rivers burst free, and the tundra that once stretched unbroken began to soften into grasslands. The people who lived through it would have seen the world itself shifting beneath their feet. You can almost feel that tremor in the ground now, the slow heartbeat of change. A curious detail found in a northern European site revealed ancient flood debris between layers of occupation. It seems one year's home became the next year's riverbed. Imagine the confusion, the awe, the sense of loss. Yet within those same layers, traces of rebuilt hearths appear proof that they adapted again. You smile at the thought. Resilience, it seems, is older than fear. Some researchers remain divided on whether this warming brought relief or chaos. The end of blizzards meant easier survival, but it also altered the balance of life. Herds shifted northward, and the familiar rhythm of cold season sheltering gave way to new uncertainties. People had to learn to build differently, to think differently. You feel that pull in your own bones now, a restless energy urging you to look forward rather than back. You walk down toward the riverbank where the ice is breaking apart. The air is filled with soft, rhythmic sounds, dripping, cracking, trickling. You crouch and touch the surface. It is slick, fragile, trembling beneath your fingers. Water seeps up through a hairline fracture, glinting like quicksilver in the morning sunday, the first melt. According to environmental reconstructions, the great freeze that shaped your ancestors' lives lasted for tens of thousands of years. To outlast such cold required not just endurance, but transformation. Every innovation, the bone huts, the hide walls, the snow shelters, was a dialogue with the elements. And now, as the cold retreats, the dialogue changes again. Oddly enough, some late Ice Age sites show evidence of open-air hearths surrounded by stone rings, as if people began to seek light rather than hide from it. The shelters grew lighter, smaller, designed for movement rather than defense. You imagine what it must have felt like to stand in the first true spring, blinking in the glare of unfiltered sunlight, almost afraid of the sky's brightness. A lesser-known discovery at a site near the Dniester River revealed an entire layer of discarded snow tools, shovels, ice picks, sled runners, all buried and unused. It is as if a generation simply laid them down and walked into a new world. You picture that moment of decision, that shared breath before letting go. Perhaps they felt both joy and grief at once. There is still debate among scientists about how quickly this warming unfolded. Some argue it took centuries. Others think the shift came within a few lifetimes. Either way, it demanded imagination. You picture the builders adapting once again, crafting homes from reeds near new wetlands, trading frozen silence for the buzz of insects and the song of rivers. The thought is strangely comforting. Change is frightening, but it is also renewal. You return to camp as the sun climbs higher. The snow near the fire pits has melted into slush, and puddles reflect the sky like shards of glass. Children splash in them, laughing, their boots sending ripples across the water. That laughter feels like prophecy. It tells you the world is ready to grow again. Your people gather for one last night in this place before the next journey. The shelters, patched and weathered, glow faintly in the firelight. You can see their textures now. Hide faded from use, ropes darkened by smoke, snow melted into ridges of crystal. These homes have served you through endless nights, and now they will rest, their purpose fulfilled. Archaeologists studying early Holocene settlements note that as the earth warmed, shelters became more experimental. People dug less into the soil and reached upward instead, building with reeds, bark, and mud. It was the beginning of architecture that looked toward the sky. You imagine that tomorrow's shelters will breathe differently, less like cocoons, more like wings. As darkness falls, you sit by the river's edge. The water moves freely now, carrying fragments of ice downstream. Each fragment catches the firelight and glows for an instant before vanishing into shadow. You realize that this is what survival really means: to melt, to flow, to keep going, even as everything changes. You look back at your shelter one last time. Its curved roof glimmers in the moonlight, sturdy but quiet, as if aware its time is ending. You reach out to touch it, your palm resting on the hide, still faintly warm from the fire inside. "Thank you," you whisper, though no one hears. Then you turn toward the river, following the current with your eyes until it disappears into the distance. The wind rises softly, carrying the scent of water and thawing earth. Somewhere far away, a bird cries a rare sound after so much silence. The ice age is loosening its grip, and the future waits just beyond the next horizon. The following morning begins in a hush so pure it almost feels sacred. The air smells of damp soil and thawing moss, scents that have been absent for longer than memory. You rise from your sleeping mat, brush snowmelt from your cloak, and step outside into a landscape that no longer feels entirely frozen. The edges of the world are softening. The wind is gentler now, the color of the light warmer. Somewhere behind you, water drips steadily from the roof of your shelter, a slow and steady heartbeat of change. You walk toward the ridge overlooking the plain. In the distance, faint outlines of former camps show as small depressions in the snow. The shapes are ghosts of shelters now melted into the earth. It strikes you that what once felt indestructible is vanishing quietly, leaving behind only traces of warmth. Archaeologists, thousands of years later, will find these remains and study them, piecing together the story of how humanity survived the cold. But for you, the evidence is still alive. The smell of smoke, the smooth curve of bone under your fingers, the memory of laughter echoing against hide walls. Archaeological studies have revealed that some Ice Age settlements were preserved almost perfectly beneath layers of loam and frost. Inside them, charred hearthstones, bone awls, and pigments still rest exactly where their owners left them. It is widely accepted that such sites capture moments frozen in time, small windows into ordinary lives that somehow endured extraordinary conditions. You picture a future researcher kneeling in silence, brushing away soil to uncover a flint blade that once sat by your own fire. The thought feels both intimate and infinite. A curious discovery from a site near Megiri revealed tiny beads carved from ivory, scattered across the floor of a mammoth bone hut. Some scholars suggest they fell from a garment as its owner slept. Others think they were offerings made when the shelter was finally abandoned. You like to imagine both a true carelessness and reverence, sharing the same breath. The beauty of life is always tangled with its accidents. You kneel and scoop a handful of melting snow, letting it drip between your fingers. The water feels alive in a way that ice never did. Around you, the landscape shimmers under a thin mist, and every sound carries a faint echo as if the earth itself is awakening. In the far distance, you hear the crack of falling ice, a glacier surrendering to spring. Researchers continue to debate exactly how these shelters were distributed across continents. Some suggest the designs spread along trade routes, while others argue they emerged independently wherever the cold demanded creativity. The truth likely lies in both. The human instinct to survive is universal, and the forms it takes are variations on the same song. You feel a kinship with those distant builders, as though your shelters and theirs are verses of one long melody carried by wind and time. Oddly enough, fragments of clay from some later Ice Age sites show impressions of woven patterns pressed into their surfaces, probably from mats or bags laid on the ground. These accidental prints reveal a surprising sophistication. People who once slept under hides began experimenting with texture, creating small comforts that blurred the line between utility and art. You imagine lying on such a mat, tracing the ridges with tired fingers, understanding for the first time that beauty itself could be shelter. As you walk along the edge of the ridge, sunlight breaks through the thinning clouds. The light catches on the river below, turning it to gold. For the first time in months, birds appear dark specks cutting across the sky. You stop to watch them, your heart tightening with a feeling that has no word yet. Hope, perhaps, or remembrance. According to experts who study human migration, the end of the great ice brought not just warmth, but curiosity. Freed from constant peril, people began to wander farther, leaving the bones of their winter homes behind. The traces they left would one day become mysteries for others to find. You wonder what future eyes will think when they see the outlines of your camp. Will they sense the laughter that once filled it, the quiet grief that came with each melting roof? A lesser-known fact about Ice Age archaeology is that scent molecules sometimes linger in ancient soil smoke, fat, and resin preserved for millennia. Scientists can analyze these traces to reconstruct how prehistoric shelters smelled. The results always surprise them. The faint sweetness of pine, the tang of animal fat, even hints of herbs used in rituals. The memory of a home can survive in air long after its walls have gone. You sit on a rock, warming your hands in a small patch of Sunday. All around the snow recedes, revealing dark soil studded with stones. The first green shoots push through, fragile but determined. You think about all the things buried here. Tools, bones, footprints, fragments of stories. Each one is a whisper from those who came before, an echo saying, "We were here. We built warmth out of cold." Experts who study early architecture often remark that these primitive shelters mark the beginning of everything: cities, temples, comfort itself. The act of enclosing space changed the human mind, teaching it how to create safety where none existed. You glance at the remains of your own dome and understand that truth with quiet certainty. Every wall you raised, every fire you tended, every seam you mended was part of that first conversation between humanity and the world. The sun dips lower, its reflection stretching long across the valley. Smoke from the fires curls upward, carrying the scent of roasted meat and thawing earth. You close your eyes and listen. The soft chatter of voices, the crack of melting ice, the faint murmur of wind weaving through the shelters. Everything feels lighter now, as though even the air has learned to exhale. Someday the shelters will vanish completely, their bones absorbed by soil and memory. But the idea will live on, passed from one age to the next. Every home, every hearth, every roof that follows will carry the echo of these first domes. The warmth you built will outlast you, written into the earth itself. You rise and walk back to camp, the light fading to amber. Behind you the wind picks up again, gentle and low, carrying your footprints into the coming dark. It feels like the world saying thank you. Morning arrives soft and grey, the kind of light that feels older than the sky. You wake to the steady hush of water dripping from the edge of the roof and the distant call of birds. The sound startles you at first, a high, fragile trill that seems impossible in a world built from frost. But it is real. The thaw is deepening, and life is creeping back across the land. You pull your cloak tighter, stepping outside to greet the change. The valley looks different now. Patches of green push through the snow, and streaks of dark soil break open like veins across the white. The air smells rich, full of promise and decay. Meltwater runs in small rivulets down the hill, gathering in clear pools that reflect the faint Sunday. You kneel and scoop a handful to drink. It tastes like stone and memory, colder than it looks, but clean enough to make you close your eyes in gratitude. Your people are stirring. Some are rolling hides to dry. Others are airing out the furs that once lined their shelters. The storm season is ending, but its lessons linger in every movement. You watch as a young woman ties a fresh cord of sinew across a cracked beam, her motions slow and deliberate. Nothing is wasted. Every scar in the material becomes part of its strength. Archaeologists studying post-Ice Age sites have found clear evidence of ingenuity born from survival. As the earth warmed, shelters evolved to fit gentler climates. The old heavy domes gave way to lighter structures made from reeds, bark, and woven grass. The need for insulation faded, replaced by a need for air and light. You can feel that shift already in your bones. The cold no longer dictates your every thought. Curiosity begins to take its place. Oddly enough, at some transitional sites, ancient builders mixed snow technology with plant fiber, creating hybrid dwellings that blended the past with the future. They used moss to line walls instead of fat, and reeds to patch old hides. It was as if humanity refused to let go of the knowledge that saved it, weaving the memory of the Ice Age into new forms. You see that same instinct now as your companions repurpose old bones into supports for drying racks and tools for weaving baskets. Some scholars remain divided on whether the end of the Ice Age brought relief or disorientation. Warmth meant safety, yet it also erased the familiarity of snow and silence. The people who once measured their lives by firelight had to learn the rhythm of rain and growth. You imagine how strange it must have felt to hear thunder for the first time, or to sleep without the sound of wind clawing at the walls. Comfort, it seems, comes with its own kind of unease. You walk along the riverbank, your boots sinking into damp earth. The river runs fast now, thick with silt and melting ice. Small birds dart across its surface, their wings flashing silver. Each movement feels fragile and miraculous. You find yourself wondering if the same wonder once filled the hearts of your ancestors when they first saw green after generations of white. According to many researchers, this period of change was not only environmental but psychological. The cold had taught humanity cooperation and patience, but the return of warmth sparked imagination. People began to decorate tools more richly, carve figures for beauty rather than need, and shape dwellings with care for how they looked, not just how they held. You think of that as you watch a child arrange colored pebbles around a hearth purely for pleasure. It is the first spark of art made from joy rather than survival. A curious discovery in southern Russia revealed one settlement where the bones of mammoths were used not for homes, but for sculptures. The builders shaped the ivory into spirals and pillars, setting them upright around a central fire pit. Some experts call it an early monument, others a gathering place. Whatever it was, it marked a shift. Humans were no longer hiding from nature, but speaking back to it. You can feel that same shift now as the river hums beside you, no longer a threat but a companion. There is still debate among anthropologists about what drove this creative flowering. Some point to abundance, others to memory. When the struggle for survival loosened its grip, people finally had room to dream. You can sense that dream in the air around you now, a quiet hum of possibility. The Ice Age built endurance, but the thaw is building vision. A lesser-known fact from early agricultural studies is that many of the first farming settlements arose in regions once carved by glaciers. The soil left behind was fertile, rich with minerals and meltwater. The same ice that once threatened life prepared the ground for it. You look at the dark patches of soil near the river and understand that nothing in nature ends, it only changes shape. Back at camp, the group has gathered for one final meal before moving on. The fire burns low, its smoke curling lazily into the pale air. The conversation drifts easily, punctuated by laughter. Someone is humming softly, and the rhythm matches the steady rush of the river nearby. You look around at these faces, each one worn by winter yet glowing with resilience, and feel a swell of affection that words could never carry. Soon you will travel toward greener lands, toward a future that has no memory of blizzards. The shelters that saved you will be left behind, slowly sinking into earth and time. But their lessons will walk with you forever. How to build with patience, how to listen to wind, how to find warmth in one another. The sun dips lower, and the firelight deepens. The air smells of thawed soil and wood smoke. You close your eyes and listen to the mingled sounds of voices, river, and breeze. The world is changing, but the rhythm of life endures. You smile, knowing that this story of shelter, of survival, of warmth against the cold will never truly end. It will simply take new forms, wherever humans dare to build a home. The sun climbs slowly above the horizon, spilling a warm, honey-colored light across the valley. You wake to its touch, blinking as your eyes adjust to brightness that feels almost foreign. Around you, the last snowdrifts glisten like shards of glass melting into the earth. The air smells of moss and ash, of damp soil still learning what warmth means. It is quiet except for the soft murmur of water running somewhere beyond the ridge. The long winter has ended. You step outside and stand still, breathing deeply. For the first time in months, the air carries no hint of ice. The ground beneath your boots is springy with thaw. You listen for the sounds that once defined survival: the crackle of fire, the howl of wind, the scraping of bone against hide, but all you hear is birdsong. It feels unreal, almost fragile, this peace. You close your eyes, and the world hums with calm. Archaeologists studying early Holocene layers have found that when the Great Freeze finally loosened, people changed not only their tools and homes, but also their minds. The art left behind: carved animals, painted hands, clay figurines became softer, more fluid, faces began to appear. Humanity was learning to see itself again, no longer just as survivor, but as maker. You look down at your hands, scarred and strong, and recognize that same shift inside yourself. The age of endurance is giving way to the age of creation. A curious discovery from a site near the Black Sea revealed post holes arranged in perfect circles, the first hints of permanent villages. The same people who once packed their homes onto sleds began to build in one place, trusting the seasons to return. You smile, imagining the courage that took. To stay was as daring as to wander. The cold had taught movement. The warmth now teaches stillness. There is quiet debate among researchers about whether this moment, the end of the Ice Age, marks the true beginning of civilization. Some say it was when humans stopped fleeing the weather and started shaping it, bending soil and water to will. Others think civilization began earlier, in the shared fires of the frozen plains. Perhaps it began everywhere, wherever people worked together to hold back the dark. You glance at the horizon and think the truth must be simpler still. Civilization begins whenever warmth is shared. Oddly enough, chemical traces from ancient hearths show that many Ice Age camps burned down intentionally at the end of winter, not by accident, but as a farewell. Fire cleansed what had served its purpose, releasing the spirit of the shelter back into the air. You pick up a small torch, hesitating only a moment before touching it to the edge of your own hide dome. The flame crawls upward slowly, turning the material to curls of black smoke. It rises gently, without anger, as if it understands. The others watch quietly. No one speaks. The fire spreads in controlled waves, devouring the structure that has carried you through so many storms. When the roof finally collapses, the sound is soft, almost like a sigh. What remains is a ring of stones, a few bones charred at the edges, and the smell of completion. You stand for a long while, eyes fixed on the smoke rising toward the brightening sky. There is grief, yes, but also release. According to several historians, rituals like this, letting go through fire, symbolized gratitude. The shelter had done its duty. It had earned rest. You understand that instinct deeply. Every wall, every beam, every seam stitched by hand deserves to end with dignity. You turn from the ashes and feel lighter, your breath steady, your steps unburdened. A lesser-known but touching find, from an ancient settlement in northern Spain, revealed a circle of footprints around a burnt hearth, preserved by clay. They belonged to adults and children alike. It seems that when their shelter was gone, they danced around the ashes, celebrating not loss but continuity. You think of that now as your people begin to hum softly beside you, their voices blending with the wind. The melody rises, simple and steady, the same rhythm that carried you through blizzards and endless nights. The snow in the valley has all but vanished now. Patches of grass stretch across the plain, and water glints in shallow pools. The air is thick with the smell of life returning. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a herd of reindeer moves north, their shapes flickering in the distance like moving clouds. You feel an ache in your chest, the same ache that always comes when something ends and something else begins. Experts generally agree that the legacy of the Ice Age shelters is not their architecture but their meaning. They taught humanity how to work with the elements rather than against them, how to build comfort out of chaos. Every house, every hearth, every fire that came later is an echo of that first understanding. The wind that once threatened became a song. The snow that once killed became a tool. Out of cold, people learned care. You turn your face toward the Sunday. It is warm enough now to sting slightly on your skin, and you let it. The others are already walking, their silhouettes dark against the gleaming horizon. You take one last look at the place that sheltered you through the storms, the circle of stones, the drifting smoke, and then begin to follow. The air is full of the sounds of melting and movement, the hush of snow giving way to running water. With each step, you feel lighter. The blizzards have passed. The shelters have done their work. Ahead lies a world waiting to be built anew, a world that will remember you even when your footprints are gone. The wind settles as night comes. You sit beneath a sky no longer silver but soft and blue, the stars gleaming like embers scattered by an ancient hand. Around you, the ground breathes warmth, the frost replaced by the scent of living earth. You close your eyes and hear it still, the quiet hum of the world, steady and kind. In this stillness, you understand that survival was never the whole story. It was the beginning of learning how to belong. Every wall you raised, every fire you guarded, every small act of care turned wilderness into home. The shelters of bone and snow have long melted away, yet the memory of them lingers in every roof, every door, every space where warmth gathers against the dark. The Ice Age has ended, but its gift remains: patience, resilience, wonder. The cold taught you that endurance is sacred, that hands working together can shape safety even in the most merciless places. The thaw teaches you something gentler, that life, once protected, will bloom again. You breathe in, slow and deep. The air carries a trace of smoke, a whisper of the shelters that came before. Their stories drift upward with every exhale, joining the long sigh of history that never truly stops. Above you, the stars shimmer, bright and endless. Somewhere, the firelight of your ancestors still burns, steady as your heartbeat. So rest now. Let the world cradle you in its warmth. Let the wind quiet to a lullaby, the earth hum beneath you, and the memories of the cold fade into dreams. The shelters still stand, somewhere deep in time, built from courage, love, and the will to live. Sleep well, traveler. You made it through the blizzard,